Chapter 21. Kushina and Minato, first place, Hankawa. Ichiro couldn't help but praise Hankawa's progress since enrollment has been evident to all. Everyone should learn from him. Kakashi instinctively clenched his fist. Though it was just a trivial physical training exercise, he couldn't help feeling a bit dissatisfied. After all, he'd always been first in every area in the class. Ah! Might Guy clutched his head dramatically. If it hadn't been for the sudden cramp he experienced near the finish line, he might have won. But no matter. Physical training wasn't everything. What thrilled him was discovering a new rival. Kakashi actually lost? Obito Uchiha seemed more upset than if he'd lost himself. Damn it! Kakashi is only allowed to lose to me. Noara Rin glanced at Hankawa, who was still catching his breath but looked composed even drenched in sweat. Her curiosity grew. Why was someone from an ordinary ninja background so strong? After defeating Sarutobi Asuma, he'd now outrun Kakashi and Might Guy. Could it be their class was about to produce a genius from the civilian ranks? Rin thought of Minato Namikaze, who had been taken as a disciple by Jiraiya. It's just physical training. Sarutobi Asuma gritted his teeth. The next second, he saw the petite figure of Kurenai stand up and walk over to Hankawa. Suddenly, he just wanted to go home. He was exhausted. Hankawa, you're amazing. Kurenai jogged over to Hankawa and sat down beside him. She exhaled deeply and pushed her damp hair behind her ears, revealing her fair forehead. Hankawa nodded weakly. To surpass Kakashi and Guy in the final stretch, he'd pushed himself to the limit, and now he was utterly drained. But inside, he was exhilarated. 2 skill boosts and a month of hard work had finally brought him to their level. This cheat-like ability was truly impressive. Of course, only when it came to running. In a fight, he knew he still wouldn't stand a chance. With physical training over, school was dismissed. Hankawa told Kurenai to head home as he made his way north. He'd spent much time training at Training Ground 4 and had familiarized himself with the area. North of Training Ground 4 lay the infamous Forest of Death, a natural wonder created by the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, using wood release. As he walked, Hankawa noticed footsteps behind him. Turning around, he saw Kakashi. Heading to train? Hankawa asked. Kakashi gave a slight nod. Today was a little different. He intended to push himself harder after losing in physical training. You too? Kakashi asked in return. Something like that, Hankawa replied after a moment. Normal ninjas wouldn't bother training with explosive tags. If he mentioned it, others might think he was just wasting money. But Hankawa had his own system to grind progress bars. At Training Ground 4, Hankawa continued walking north. Kakashi glanced his way, curious but didn't ask further. After some thought, Kakashi began his running exercises. Sorry, I had a mission and got delayed, said Tsukumo Hataki as he arrived half an hour later. Kakashi shook his head, indicating it was fine. Why are you running today? Tsukumo asked, a bit surprised. Warm up, Kakashi replied calmly. For some reason, he didn't want to tell his father about losing to Hankawa in physical training. Still, he had to admit his father's instincts were spot on. Hankawa's rapid progress was starting to put a bit of pressure on him. Of course, Kakashi still believed that in the end, he would be the one to win. Underscore 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 the forest of death. Dense branches formed a canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. Even though it was daytime, the forest felt as dark as night. Suddenly, Hankoa's eyes lit up. He picked up his pace, and the scenery opened up. A wide and spacious riverbank came into view. Hankoa pulled out an explosive tag and casually tossed it. Boom! The ground erupted, leaving a shallow crater, with scorched earth all around. Cheap things are never good. The problem wasn't the explosive tag, it was him. Hankoa felt that the power of this 300 Ryo tag was weaker than the simplest fire style, fireball jutsu. Focusing his mind, he opened his system panel and checked the progress bar. It had increased by 1%, proving that explosive tags were considered ninja tools and did indeed contribute. Hankoa resumed his training. The experience reminded him of his childhood, setting off firecrackers during New Year's celebrations. Unfortunately, once he grew older and had money, he no longer had the chance to play like that. Before long, the ground was riddled with craters, and waves of invisible heat distorted the air. "Who's the idiot?" A furious shout came from afar, growing closer. Hankoa turned toward the voice and saw a young woman with striking red hair approaching. "Was this your doing?" Her expression softened slightly when she saw him. "I'm practicing with explosive tags," Hankoa replied, blinking innocently. "Explosive tags?" The red-haired woman scoffed. "No wonder I haven't caught a single fish." Since he was just a kid, she didn't get too angry. "Fish?" Hankoa quickly realized what she meant. "Wait a moment." He jogged to the riverbank, where most of the fish had already been scared off by his explosive tags. Feeling a bit embarrassed, Hankoa walked upstream and soon spotted a school of fish. He casually tossed another explosive tag. Boom! The river surface rippled, and several fish floated to the top, unconscious. "Come over." Hankoa called to her. "Using explosive tags to catch fish? Only you could think of that." The red-haired woman glanced at the floating fish and couldn't help but laugh. The value of all the fish combined probably didn't even match the cost of a single tag. With a casual wave of her hand, she formed a net out of chakra and scooped up the fish effortlessly. Hankoa's lips twitched. Her chakra control is terrifying. He had a pretty good guess about her identity. Red hair carried a special significance in the ninja world. "Hey, kid, what's your name?" The red-haired woman tossed the fish into a bucket she had brought along. "I'm Hankoa," he replied. "Uzumaki Kushina." She shook the bucket, the fish splashing inside, and extended an invitation. "There's too much fish for just 2 people. Want to join us?" 2 people. Minato Namikaze. As a fan of the original story, there was no way Hankoa would miss this chance. He nodded enthusiastically. "Follow me," Kushina said, carrying the bucket and leading the way. A few minutes later, Hankoa spotted a blonde young man busy preparing food. "Minato. Look." Kushina beamed, showing him the bucket. "I'd say this is 3 or 4 pounds. Who asked you?" An odd thought popped into Hankoa's head. Back in his past life, a neighbor used to love fishing. Whenever that man caught something, he'd stroll around the neighborhood bragging about how much his catch weighed. One time, after catching 7 or 8 pounds of fish, he made 3 laps around the entire community. The smell of explosive tags, Minato Namikaze remarked, sniffing the air. Sharp as always, Kushina laughed. He used explosive tags to catch them. Minato took the bucket and started cleaning the fish while Kushina chatted with Hankawa. She seemed like she hadn't had a conversation in ages. She was incredibly talkative and full of energy. Hankawa couldn't get a word in edgewise. Chapter 22. The Genius Novelist, Dinner's Ready. Minato Namikaze interrupted the conversation, announcing, "Try my fire release, charred perfection supreme style. You keep coming up with these weird names no one understands." Kushina Uzumaki rolled her eyes as she took a grilled fish from him. "I couldn't help myself," Minato said, scratching his head with a sheepish smile. Hankawa quietly bit into his grilled fish. Better to eat fish than to endure their lovey-dovey antics. "How does it taste?" Kushina turned to Hankawa, asking with genuine curiosity. From their earlier chat, she had already learned about this pretty child situation, a war orphan currently living with Yuhi Shinka's family. It was a tragic story, somewhat similar to her own past. "It's delicious," Hankawa said earnestly, nodding. "Next time, you should try my cooking," Kushina said with a warm smile. "Sure," Hankawa agreed readily. Meeting Kushina had been an accident, but forming a good relationship with them was definitely a win, especially with Minato Namikaze. In the upcoming Third Shinobi World War, having such connections might just be a lifesaver. Kushina. Minato coughed lightly to get her attention. As usual, Kushina had sneaked out by trapping her ANBU guards with sealing techniques. According to her, she planned to do it again. What? Kushina clenched her fist, feigning irritation. "Are you saying my cooking isn't good enough?" "It's delicious," Minato replied instantly. "Good answer," Kushina said, pretending not to notice the underlying meaning. Life within the village barriers was just too dull for her. Hankawa felt like he'd been force-fed another serving of their affection. The meal ended amid their light-hearted chatter. Hankawa said his goodbyes and headed back to Konoha. By the time he returned, the sky had turned dark, and the streetlights illuminated the village roads. He couldn't help but imagine a crow flying by, heralding the appearance of Itachi Uchiha. Luckily, the Uchiha clan's downfall is still far away, and I'm not even part of their clan. As he walked, Hankawa opened his status panel. The progress bar for the E-rank trait, 7 ninja tools had reached 70%. Apparently, using explosive tags was much more effective than he had expected. Perhaps this was the power of pay to win. As the saying goes, money buys happiness. The progress bar for the E-rank trait, Academic Star, was also nearly complete. All that was left was the grand finale, the end of term exams. "I'm home." Hankawa pushed the door open and started changing his shoes at the entrance. Hearing his voice, Kurenai Yuhi jumped off the couch and darted out like an excited little rabbit. Her father, Yuhi Shinku, sitting across from her, couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. "My standing in this household is seriously under threat." "Hankawa, why are you so late?" Kurenai crossed her arms and pouted. "And you didn't even tell me in advance." "Ah, so that's the real issue." Seeing her puffed-up cheeks, Hankawa smiled and said, "I ran into Minato Namikaze." "Who's Minato Namikaze?" Kurenai tilted her head in confusion. "You met Minato?" Yuhi Shinku's face lit up with surprise. I ran into him at the 4th training ground, Hankoa said, improvising. Maybe he thought I had potential, so he invited me to eat grilled fish with him. It's probably because the Hokage mentioned you to him, Yuhi Shinku said thoughtfully. Kurenai Yuhi widened her eyes in surprise. Even the Hokage knows about Hankoa. What do you think? Shinku Yuhi patted her head with a smile. He did defeat Asuma, after all. It was just a sparring match, Hankoa said earnestly. Alright, let's continue this inside. Shinku gave Hankoa a sharp look and led Kurenai inside. Midline horizontal ellipsis. Hankoa was puzzled. What's going on? I didn't leave my explosive tags parked outside your house or anything. Once in the living room, Hankoa cut straight to the point. Uncle Shinku, I want to learn Kenjutsu. Since Heiei Geku and Yuzuki Yugao were still younger than him, and he didn't know Kisame Hashigaki, his only option was to turn to Shinku. Why the sudden interest in Kenjutsu? Shinku looked at him with surprise. I don't have enough chakra right now to learn new genjutsu, so I thought I'd learn Kenjutsu for self-defense. Hankoa had already prepared this explanation. Shinku nodded slightly. It was a valid reason, leaving him no room to refuse. So this is what it's like to be a genius, Shinku thought, feeling a bit emotional. Alright, I'll teach you Kenjutsu in a moment. Huh? Hankoa instinctively looked doubtful. You little brat. Shinku's eyebrows furrowed as he glared. What, you think a genjutsu ninja like me wouldn't know some Kenjutsu? Kenjutsu was part of taijutsu, and taijutsu was a fundamental skill for all ninjas. For genjutsu users, it was essential as a fallback when their illusions failed. No problem at all. Hankoa straightened up immediately and replied seriously, Thank you, Uncle Shinku. I want to learn too. Kurenai raised her small hand eagerly. Kurenai, Shinku said gently, learn genjutsu first, and then I'll teach you Kenjutsu. Fine midline horizontal ellipsis, Kurenai understood there was a big gap between her and Hankoa. Trying to learn everything at once might lead to mastering nothing. Go wait for me outside, Shinku instructed, heading to his room. After a while, Shinku returned with 2 wooden swords. The Kenjutsu I'm teaching you is called Konoha-style Kenjutsu. Though it's a basic sword technique, it's nothing to scoff at. He casually tossed one of the wooden swords to Hankoa. If you master it, you can develop your own secret techniques. Hankoa immediately thought of Konoha-style, Willow, which was a fusion of Kenjutsu and Genjutsu. Let's start with the basics, Shinku said, swinging his wooden sword to demonstrate. Yes, sir. Hankoa nodded with a serious expression. Under the night sky, moonlight bathed the ground. After 2 hours of practice, Hankoa finally unlocked a new trait. E-rank ninjutsu trait, Sword Ninja, unobtained, unlock condition, achieve basic proficiency in Konoha-style Kenjutsu. Current progress, 5%. Once training was over, Hankoa took a bath and returned to his room. Although tired, he didn't immediately go to sleep. Instead, he picked up a pen. After much thought, he began drafting ideas and an outline for a novel. The story he had in mind was Demon Slayer Shinobi. 2 days passed. In the early morning, after his usual jog through the streets, Hankoa entered the Konoha Knowledge Bookstore. There, he quickly found Tsuchibashi and handed over the outline for Demon Slayer Shinobi. So soon. Tsuchibashi asked casually. What's your friend's name? Thunderfire Blade, Hankoa replied after a pause. That's his pen name. Ah, a pen name. I get it. Tsuchibashi gave him a knowing smile. What exactly do you think you get? Hankoa felt a shiver down his spine. He didn't dare imagine the social embarrassment he'd face if the truth about this friend got out. Tsuchibashi began reading. Before long, his smile disappeared, replaced by a serious expression. Then, his face lit up with excitement. Your friend is a genius. Tsuchibashi exclaimed, his tone filled with enthusiasm. This kind of ninja setting is unprecedented, it's bound to be a bestseller. Chapter 23. Dual Hankoa didn't linger and left the Konoha Knowledge bookstore right away. There was nothing more he needed to handle, Tsuchibashi would take care of the rest. He just wondered which writer Tsuchibashi would hire as a ghostwriter. He thought of Jiraiya, but that was unlikely, hiring a ghostwriter wouldn't reflect well if it got out. Hankoa headed to the fourth training ground, picked up a wooden sword, and began practicing the Konoha-style sword technique. An hour later, he finished his training and started walking toward the ninja academy. Before long, Hankoa spotted Asuma Sarutobi. Leaning against a tree with his hands in his pockets, Asuma gazed at the sky at a 45-degree angle, exuding an air of invincibility. You're here. Asuma turned his head and said. Hankoa tugged at the corner of his mouth. What was he supposed to say to that? You weren't supposed to come. Do you think this is a samurai drama? I'm here to remind you not to forget about the practical combat class this afternoon. A gleam of eagerness flashed in Asuma's eyes. He could hardly wait to defeat Hankoa and win back Kurenai Yuhi's heart. I know. Hankoa nodded slightly. Good. Asuma suddenly turned his back to him and said, I hope you'll make it worth my while. With a dramatic flick of his head, he strode off. Hankoa paid no attention to this small episode. He headed to the classroom, greeted Shizun, and started studying. Class, please take out your Will of Fire books, said Ichiro, smiling as he stood at the podium. Who can tell me what the Will of Fire represents? Many students eagerly raised their hands. Obito, you answer. Ichiro scanned the room and called out a name. Where the leaves dance, the fire burns eternal. The flames will continue to illuminate the village and cause new leaves to sprout. Obito Uchiha recited in one breath. Not bad. Ichiro opened the book and said, Today, we'll discuss the new leaves, the future of Konoha Village, which is all of you. Hankoa, however, tuned it out and continued solving math problems. The workbook under his pen seemed to come alive, and by the end of the morning, it was filled with answers. The afternoon was dedicated to the practical combat class. For first-year students, the combat lessons were laughably basic, essentially weaklings pecking at each other. Since they hadn't yet learned the three basic techniques, they could only practice taijutsu and weapon throwing. The three basic techniques wouldn't be taught until the second semester. Although they were considered the most fundamental ninja skills, many students needed 6 years to master them. Kakashi, I challenge you. As soon as class began, Obito Uchiha couldn't wait to shout. On normal days, sparring depended entirely on Kakashi Hataki's mood. Most of the time, Obito couldn't get a match, leaving him seething in frustration. But during practical combat class, Kakashi couldn't easily refuse. Asuma Sarutobi was a second too late, swallowing his challenge, leaving him simmering with frustration. The sight of Hankawa chatting and laughing with Kurenai Yuhi only made it worse. "Kakashi," said Ichiro with a smile, "why don't you demonstrate for your classmates?" Kakashi walked to the center of the field with a calm expression. "Obito, be careful," Noara Rin said helplessly. "Don't worry." Obito patted his chest confidently. "I'll hold back." Rin was momentarily at a loss for words. He kept losing every match. Where did he get the confidence? Obito stepped to face Kakashi, forming the seal of confrontation. As soon as the seal was formed, he charged forward. Kakashi remained still and threw a single punch. Uchiha Obito lunged low, sliding forward to attack Kakashi Hataki's legs. But Kakashi was faster. Body flicker technique. In an instant, he sprang forward, appearing behind Obito and delivering a swift kick. Bang! Obito spun away like a toppled spinning top and collapsed on the ground, unable to get up. "Winner, Kakashi Hatake," Ichiro announced, unsurprised. Cheers erupted around them. Kakashi, with his strength and cool demeanor, was incredibly popular in the class. Although Hankawa was starting to catch up, he was still second place, falling just short of the critical step to surpass Kakashi. "Obito, are you okay?" Noara Rin hurried over and asked. "I'm fine." Obito stood up and said, "I wasn't in top form today. Next time, I'll win." Midline horizontal ellipsis. Rin swallowed her comforting words. She sighed resignedly. "Does anyone else want to challenge?" "If not, we'll continue with the lesson," Ichiro asked. "I challenge Hankawa." Sarutobi Asuma raised his hand. All eyes shifted from Kakashi to Asuma. Asuma, the Hokage's son, had previously lost to Hankawa. This was a grudge match. The class buzzed with curiosity, their hearts aflame with gossip. "Hankawa," Asuma walked to the center of the field and said with a snort, "the same genjutsu won't work on me this time." Hankawa ignored him and casually formed the seal of confrontation. As soon as the seal was made, the spar began. Asuma immediately diverted his gaze, focusing on the ground. Most genjutsu targeted vision. The simplest way to counter it was to avoid looking into the opponent's eyes. Using his peripheral vision and sound to locate Hankawa, he was slightly disadvantaged but still capable. Especially since Asuma had undergone special training over the past 2 weeks. The sound of something cutting through the air broke the silence. "Kunai." Asuma twisted his body and dodged flawlessly. 2 kunai struck the ground on either side of him. Glancing at them, a smug smile spread across his face. His 2 weeks of sweat and effort had paid off. Now the tides had turned. Asuma quickly formed hand signs, keeping his gaze on Hankawa's feet. Wind release, gale palm. A gust of wind surged from his palms. But in the next instant, the kunai on the ground sprang up like carp leaping out of water. What's going on? Had the kunai come to life? Asuma instinctively turned his head and froze, eyes wide like saucers. Threads. Barely visible strings attached to the kunai were now crossing each other, entangling him under Hankawa's control. Asuma stumbled and fell face first into the dirt. "No! If I go down here, my pride is over." Quickly regaining his composure, Asuma suppressed the pain and scrambled to his feet. But waiting for him was another kunai. Asuma's face turned bright red with frustration. You're not playing by the rules. A genjutsu user relying on kunai like an Uchiha? This is outrageous. But a loss was a loss. In front of so many classmates, Asuma couldn't shamelessly make excuses like Obito. Winner, Hankawa, Ichiro announced, breaking Asuma's hesitation. Asuma sighed in relief, but frustration followed immediately. 2 weeks of special training had been completely wasted. Who could endure that? E-rank talent trait, Swift Gale, upgraded. Wind release proficiency increased by 30%. Seeing the 2 glowing lines appear before him, Hankawa couldn't help but feel elated. 24. If you don't work hard, you'll become a toy for women. I'll be back. Sarutobi Asuma didn't know what to say, so he forced out a harsh parting line. He turned and left the field, feeling the weight of everyone's gazes, unable to stand still. If it weren't for the fact that class was still in session, he would have bolted long ago. Hankawa couldn't help but smile. Oh, Asuma. He had done it on purpose. He didn't even need to guess what Asuma had trained in. Knowing that, he simply countered it. Not only did it allow him to win easily, but it also left Asuma feeling deeply unsatisfied, ensuring he'd return for a rematch. A perfect plan. Kunai can be this useful. Noara Rin's eyes sparkled with interest. It's not because he's strong, it's because we Uchiha are strong, Obito Uchiha interjected, noticing her reaction and feeling a sense of crisis. He's copying us Uchiha. Why have I never seen you use it? Rin asked, puzzled. As a ninja from a civilian background, her only contact with the Uchiha clan was Obito. Obito broke out in a cold sweat. Seeing his reaction, Rin didn't press further, assuming he was just being stubborn and spouting nonsense again. Kakashi Hatake shook his head slightly. Obito was half right. Using threads to control kunai was indeed a signature technique favored by the Uchiha clan. With their Sharingan granting superior dynamic vision, such techniques were relatively easy for them to master. But Hankawa didn't have a Sharingan. This demonstrated his impressive proficiency with weapon manipulation. Even so, the fact that Hankawa chose not to use genjutsu was unexpected. Poor Asuma had been completely outplayed. But to Kakashi, this was useful intelligence. When the final exams came around, he'd know to be wary of Hankawa's skill with thrown weapons. As soon as the practical combat class ended, Asuma bolted out of the room. He wanted to leave the scene of his humiliation as quickly as possible. Bang! The sound startled Hiruzen Sarutobi, who had been lounging on the sofa, smoking. What's going on? Did Danzo storm in, slamming doors again? Turning his head, he saw Asuma standing there, looking utterly dejected. Lost again? Hiruzen blurted out. Asuma flinched as if physically struck, taking yet another critical hit. I haven't even said a word, and you already assume I lost. Damn it! Ninjas are the worst. Asuma stormed into his room and locked the door. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he felt a wave of gloom envelop him. He suddenly had the urge to smoke. Images of his father enjoying a leisurely puff of smoke popped into his mind. In the living room, Hiruzen waited a moment before receiving a detailed report of the match between Asuma and Hankawa from the ANBU operative Haru. The report was short, so short that Hiruzen almost couldn't believe it. Asuma wasn't the top genius of his generation, but with abundant resources backing him, he wasn't far behind. Before the match, Hiruzen had expected Hankawa to lose the rematch, given that Asuma had undergone 2 weeks of intensive training. But after reading the report, Hiruzen understood. The loss wasn't undeserved. Hankawa had completely anticipated Asuma's strategy and outmaneuvered him with ease. This was what Hiruzen called battle intelligence. It reminded him of Minato Namikaze, who possessed an extraordinary level of battle intelligence. Even when facing stronger opponents, Minato could hold his own. This is quite the unexpected discovery, Hiruzen mused. Hiruzen Sarutobi stroked his beard thoughtfully. Hankawa's performance satisfied him, but Asuma wasn't bad either. The past 2 weeks of effort hadn't gone unnoticed, in fact, it filled Hiruzen with pride. The saying goes, diligence makes up for lack of talent. If Asuma could maintain this level of dedication, he might eventually catch up to Hankawa. Who knows? The Sarutobi clan might produce another Hokage someday. Asuma, Hiruzen called out from the door. Do you know why you lost? After a few seconds, the door creaked open. Why? Asuma asked stiffly. Lack of combat experience, Hiruzen replied with a smile. Focusing solely on countering genjutsu wasn't enough. What should I do? Asuma asked instinctively. Do you want to learn? I can teach you, Hiruzen said, raising his voice slightly. After all, I am the Hokage. Saturday arrived quickly. Aside from attending classes, Hankawa spent most of his time practicing the Konoha-style swordsmanship, progressing to about 30% proficiency. But today wasn't about sword training, it was about studying medicine. After breakfast, Hankawa leisurely made his way to the Konoha hospital. Hankawa, here again, huh? You've grown taller, let me take a closer look. Have you eaten yet? Want to come to my room? On his way, several nurses greeted him cheerfully. Since Hankawa often visited the hospital to borrow books, he had grown familiar with them. Being handsome and having connections to Nono Yakushi naturally made him quite popular. Hankawa had come to understand one thing deeply: if you don't work hard, you'll end up as a toy for women. Finally, he reached Nono Yakushi's office, and the lively atmosphere quieted down. Hankawa raised his hand and knocked on the door. Come in, came Nono Yakushi's voice. Dr. Nono, Hankawa said, but froze mid-sentence. Sitting at the desk wasn't Nono Yakushi, it was Tsunade. Hey, kid. Long time no see, Tsunade said, resting her chin on the back of her hand. She leaned forward slightly, her considerable meats pressing against the desk and drawing attention to her silhouette. Lady Tsunade, Hankawa quickly recovered and greeted her politely. I heard from Nono that you've been studying medical ninjutsu lately. Tsunade asked with a smile. Yes, I've been studying, Hankawa replied sheepishly. But I haven't made much progress. Reading alone won't help, you need hands-on practice, Tsunade said, standing up. It just so happens that Nono and I have a surgery coming up. You can observe. Understood, Hankawa said, his eyes lighting up. Practical experience was the best teacher. Plus, this was an opportunity to build rapport with Tsunade, a win-win situation for him. Nono Yakushi, however, looked slightly concerned. She worried that Hankawa might not be able to handle the sight of blood. Let's go, Tsunade said, leading the way out. She had agreed to this mainly as a favor to Nono. How much Hankawa could learn would depend on his own abilities. Lady Tsunade, please, I'm counting on you. He's the sole survivor, a young man with blonde hair greeted them at the entrance to the operating room. I'll do my best, Inoichi, Tsunade said seriously. Yamanaka Inoichi? Hankawa thought to himself. The Yamanaka clan's memory inspection was the reason he'd awakened his past life memories and gained the system. But Yamanaka Inoichi was the head of the Yamanaka clan. For him and Tsunade to be personally involved, the patient must be someone extraordinary. Hankawa followed Nono into the operating room. A thick scent of blood filled the air, causing him to wrinkle his nose and feel a slight wave of nausea. To his surprise, the ninja lying on the operating table appeared utterly ordinary, just a typical chunin. 25. Medical ninja and fish. Hankawa, Nono Yakushi reminded him, during the surgery, you must follow instructions, no wandering or unnecessary movements. I understand, Hankawa nodded. Let's begin. Tsunade walked to the operating table, pulling on her gloves. Hankawa stood quietly on the side, observing. Even with the soul of an adult, the sight of open surgery made him feel uneasy. Fortunately, after a while, he adapted to the scene, at least enough not to throw up on the spot. 3 hours later, the surgery concluded. The surgeries of the ninja world gave Hankawa the impression of a fusion of science and ninjutsu. Simply put, it was like adding medical ninjutsu to the scientific surgical process to save time and enhance the overall effect. Hankawa, how was it? Tsunade asked as she removed her mask, revealing her stunning features. As expected of Lady Tsunade. You easily accomplish things others could never do, Hankawa praised sincerely. Flattery won't get you anywhere, kid, Tsunade chuckled. That's not what I meant. I learned a lot, Hankawa replied honestly. You have a strong mental fortitude, Tsunade said as she walked out. In that regard, you're well suited to becoming a medical ninja. Lady Tsunade, Yamanaka Inoichi greeted her at the door. He'll be fine now, Tsunade nodded slightly. But if you want to read his memories, it's better to wait until tomorrow. Thank you, Lady Tsunade, Inoichi exhaled in relief. Well then, the surgery's done. Time for me to take care of my own matters, Tsunade said as she turned and waved. Goodbye, everyone. Before long, she had disappeared from sight. Hankawa couldn't help but admire her. Truly Tsunade, swift, decisive, and full of charisma. But midline horizontal ellipsis by matters, could she mean gambling? Most likely. A phrase suddenly came to Hankawa's mind, she may fight, drink, and gamble, but she's still a great ninja. After glancing briefly at Yamanaka Inoichi, Hankawa followed Nono Yakushi back to her office. Hankawa, Nono asked, how are you doing with the medical books? I've almost finished the basics, Hankawa replied after a moment of thought. Good. Nono Yakushi pulled a test paper from her drawer. Complete this in 2 hours. Hankawa's eyes lit up. Was she preparing to teach him medical ninjutsu? Understood. Hankawa sat at the desk and began working on the test. It didn't even take him 2 hours to finish. Basic medical books didn't require deep understanding, just memorization. Not bad, Nono said with satisfaction. Hankawa had only gotten 2 questions wrong on the entire test, a near-perfect score for a 6-year-old. To learn medical ninjutsu, you need exceptional chakra control, Nono explained as she put the test away. What you've learned in school is far from enough. What should I do? Hankawa asked, looking every bit the diligent student. With fish, Nono said softly. Hankawa's expression turned strange as he recalled certain stories about nuns and fish. Although, standing before him, Nono was like a living priestess. Wait here. Nono left the office, returning a few minutes later with a scroll in her hands. Unrolling it, she revealed a carp inside. Come here, I'll teach you, Nono beckoned. Under her guidance, Hankawa extended his hands, letting his chakra flow out. Suddenly, he froze as a series of words appeared before his eyes. D-rank talent entry, medical ninja, trigger condition, possess 3 medical ninjutsu entries. Current progress, 10%. Hankawa couldn't help but feel excited. Finally, the health bar appeared. As the saying goes, if it has a health bar, even gods can be defeated, let alone a mere medical ninja. Similar to the D-rank talent entry, Genjutsu Chunin, the trigger condition required learning 3 ninjutsu. While the specific level wasn't stated, it was evident that basic techniques, like D-rank or C-rank ninjutsu, would suffice. Time passed quickly, and soon it was noon. Take a break and eat, Nono Yakushi said as she took out 2 bento boxes. All right. Hankawa withdrew his hands and wiped the sweat off his forehead. Although he hadn't used much chakra, maintaining a steady flow was mentally taxing. No wonder learning medical ninjutsu starts with fish. Those bastards. Chasing me over such a small amount of money. It's not like I won't pay them back. A familiar, irritated voice echoed from outside, growing louder. Tsunade stormed into the office, grumbling under her breath. Lady Tsunade, Nono Yakushi calmly reminded her, please keep your voice down. This is a hospital. Tsunade plopped down on the sofa with a slight bounce, her legs crossing casually. She wore open-toe high-heeled sandals, her red-painted toenails peeking out. Lost again? Nono Yakushi asked, unfazed by the scene. Just bad luck today, Tsunade muttered, her face full of displeasure. Nono Yakushi fell silent. Only today. You're unlucky every day. You're just not suited for gambling. Do you have another bento? Tsunade's gaze shifted to the 2 bento boxes on the table. Here. Without hesitation, Hankawa handed over his own box. Tsunade blinked, surprised by the gesture. The scene felt oddly familiar. I'll get another one, Nono Yakushi said, standing up to leave. You eat, Tsunade said, patting Hankawa's head. I'll wait for Nono. Hankawa seethed inwardly. Not again with the head pats. Someday, I'll get my revenge. Less than a minute later, Nono Yakushi returned with another bento box. Thank you. Tsunade opened the box and started eating with her chopsticks. The food came from the hospital cafeteria, average in taste but sufficient for ninja accustomed to far worse during missions. Hankawa's already learning medical ninjutsu. Tsunade asked, noticing the scroll and fish nearby. Yes, Nono Yakushi explained. His foundation is solid enough. Quite the little genius, Tsunade remarked slyly. Hankawa, if there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me. Lady Tsunade, are you planning to borrow money from me again? Nono Yakushi cut straight to the point. I'll pay you back when I win. Tsunade replied shamelessly. Nono Yakushi sighed, her patience tested. Have you ever won? Can I come? Hankoa asked, looking up. You're just a kid. You can't go to a gambling den, Nono Yakushi quickly objected. Hankoa's curiosity about gambling was worrying enough. If he picked up bad habits, it would be disastrous. Tsunade gave Hankoa a sidelong glance, a flicker of memory crossing her mind. The source of all this midline horizontal ellipsis Grandpa Hashirama. She remembered how Senju Hashirama had taken her to gambling houses as a child. I'm lucky, Hankoa said, recalling a saying from his past life, bet against Tsunade, and you'll end up with a villa by the sea. He genuinely wanted to test his luck. No way. Nono Yakushi firmly refused. Under the table, Tsunade nudged Hankoa with her foot, giving him a sly look. She wasn't planning to teach him how to gamble, she just saw him as her lucky charm. What kind of childish behavior is this? Hankoa froze for a moment before realizing what was happening. Is she actually planning to take me along? 26. Tsunade's private tutoring. No, go handle your tasks. I'll watch over Hankoa, Tsunade said casually after finishing her meal, waving her hand dismissively. You can't take him to a gambling den, Nono Yakushi said suspiciously, her eyes narrowing. I won't, Tsunade replied, crossing her arms. Of course, she wouldn't take him. If Hankoa went on his own initiative, that would be a different story entirely. In that case, I'll leave him to you, Lady Tsunade, Nono finally agreed after a moment's hesitation. Unlike Tsunade, she couldn't move so freely. The duties of Konoha Hospital required her constant attention. Hankoa, Nono said, holding 3 empty bento boxes. Be obedient, and don't upset Lady Tsunade. Understood, Hankoa nodded obediently. And one more thing, Nono added, as if suddenly recalling something. Don't leave the village for now. Why? Hankoa asked, momentarily stunned and curious. There have been several cases of children going missing near Konoha, including newborn infants, Nono explained without holding back. Missing infants? Hankoa immediately thought of the surgery Tsunade performed earlier and Yamanaka Inoichi's serious demeanor. Adding the timeline into consideration, could this be related to the wood release experiments? In the original story, Konoha conducted such experiments in an attempt to replicate Senju Hashirama's invincible wood release abilities. Using Hashirama's cells for human experimentation, the project resulted in numerous deaths before Hiruzen Sarutobi shut it down. However, Danzo Shimura and Orochimaru continued in secret, eventually producing Yamato, a successful wood release user. Just don't leave the village, Nono said softly. Konoha is filled with skilled ninja, no one would dare act within the village walls. Understood, Hankoa replied, holding back his inner commentary. With that, Nono left the office. Shall I continue, Lady Tsunade? Hankoa asked, raising his hands over the koi fish. Go ahead, Tsunade replied, glancing at him. I'll correct you if anything is wrong. Hankoa took a deep breath and let his chakra flow through his hands, emitting a warm, soft glow. Tsunade absent-mindedly drummed her fingers against her thigh, her mind wandering to where she could borrow money next. Despite her numerous debts, her reputation as one of the Sannin and a legendary medical ninja usually guaranteed someone would lend to her. In the war-torn shinobi world, a good healer was invaluable. "I'll step out for a moment," Tsunade said after spotting a potential source of funds. Hankawa nodded slightly. To his surprise, Tsunade returned less than 10 minutes later, her expression cheerful. There was no doubt, she'd managed to find some money. "Your posture is wrong," Tsunade said, approaching him. She reached out to adjust his arms, lifting them slightly. Hankawa instinctively looked up, only to have his view completely obstructed by a shadow of mountain range. He couldn't even see her face. "Focus," Tsunade reminded him. Hankawa quickly snapped back to reality and resumed his practice, his determination renewed. Under Tsunade's guidance, his progress bar increased significantly. 2 hours later, his progress had already reached 15%. Tsunade's private tutoring was indeed extraordinary. "Are you holding up just fine?" Tsunade asked, giving him a once-over. "My chakra is nearly depleted," Hankawa replied. Hankawa put away the scroll and said, "Let's go to the casino." Tsunade's eyes lit up, her beautiful face brimming with excitement. Under her lead, Hankawa found himself at a Ninja World casino. Though this was his second life, it was his first time stepping into an actual casino. Lady Tsunade, a young man at the casino entrance, stopped them, saying, "According to the rules, children are not allowed inside." "Is that so?" Tsunade raised her hand and clenched her fist. The sudden burst of pressure in the air made the man stagger back, his face pale. Please, go ahead," he stammered, quickly putting on a fawning smile. With decades of punching power behind that hand, there was no way he could stand against her. As soon as Tsunade entered the casino, all eyes turned to her, many of them gleaming with a look that screamed money. The reason was simple. She was a living legend, the big loser. Anyone who frequented the gambling scene knew her infamous reputation. As for Hankawa, he was instantly overlooked. People came to casinos to win money. Anything else was irrelevant. Hankawa took a look around. The Ninja World Casino was reminiscent of early arcade parlors. The left side had rows of gambling machines plugged into the wall, while the right had betting tables crowded with people placing their wagers. Unfortunately, there were no sultry dealers in sight. "Make some room for Lady Tsunade," a young dealer said with a smile. The money delivery queen had arrived, after all. An argument broke out around the tables as everyone scrambled to sit with Tsunade. Uh-oh. Hankawa noticed a big problem, his height. He couldn't see the betting table at all. Just as he was about to find a stool, he suddenly felt himself being lifted. A faint fragrance wafted through the air. Hankawa blinked. When he realized he was now sitting on Tsunade's lap, it finally hit him. "All right, let's start," Tsunade said, holding him in one arm as she leaned forward with a serious expression. "Why does this feel like a sport?" Hankawa thought, acutely aware of the soft weight pressing against the top of his head. Once he adjusted himself and got a clear look at the betting table, he sighed inwardly. It wasn't a simple game of high or low. Instead, it was a roulette board with 37 slots. The betting options ranged from single-number bets to red/black, odd/even, and high/low, each offering different odds. Single-number bets had the highest payout but required pure luck. Hankawa figured his luck wasn't too bad, after all, he'd been reincarnated, hadn't he? And even if it wasn't great, it couldn't possibly be worse than Tsunade's. As long as their combined luck was average, they should avoid going bankrupt. Bet on black, Hankawa said quickly when he saw Tsunade placing her chips on red. Alright, Tsunade said after a moment of thought, moving her chips to the black section. No more bets, the dealer announced, spinning the roulette wheel. A few seconds later, the result came in, black. We won. Tsunade froze for a moment before excitedly hugging Hankawa. I can't breathe. Caught off guard, Hankawa felt like two mountains had suddenly collapsed onto him. Again. Tsunade released him, her confidence soaring. We're winning it all back today. No, Lady Luck seems to be smiling on me instead, Hankawa thought, focusing intently. Sitting on his human chair, he began offering Tsunade strategic advice. Although not every bet hit, they avoided obvious mistakes, and their odds improved significantly. 3 hours later, they walked out of the casino with a modest profit of 300,000 Rio. While it wasn't a fortune, barely a third of an S-rank mission reward, it was an unprecedented success for Tsunade. Her luck, balanced by Hankawa's guidance, had finally turned normal. Let's go. Tsunade patted Hankawa's shoulder with a grin. I'm treating you to roast chicken. 27, a drunk Tsunade, ah. That hits the spot. Tsunade downed the contents of her sake bottle in one go, slamming it onto the table with a loud thud. Hankawa sat beside her, the mix of alcohol and her faint fragrance making him feel slightly dizzy. The next moment, he suddenly felt the soft cushion of her ample figure pressing against his head. Tsunade pulled him into a one-armed hug, laughing heartily. Eat as much as you want. Today's on me. Hankawa could understand why she was so happy. Initially, he had guided her to bet against her instincts, but later, that wasn't necessary. If he always advised her to go against her bets, she would eventually catch on and feel tricked. The real reason for their streak of luck was a newly triggered trait of his, E-rank talent, God of Gambling, activation condition, guides Tsunade to win 9 times. Effect, increases gambling luck by 100%. Note, cannot be synthesized. To be fair, Tsunade's luck was absurdly bad. Even with Hankawa's luck doubled, it only barely managed to balance out hers. What are you spacing? Out for. Tsunade picked up a piece of roasted chicken with her chopsticks and held it up to his mouth. Here, try the roast chicken. Thank you, Lady Tsunade. Hankawa took a bite and swallowed it. When's your next free day? Tsunade asked with a mischievous smile. After an entire afternoon of gambling, she now fully regarded Hankawa as her personal good luck charm. I still need to practice medical ninjutsu, Hankawa replied earnestly. That's easy. I'll teach you. Tsunade took another swig of sake, sighing contentedly afterward. Of course, she wasn't formally accepting him as a disciple, just offering casual guidance. Hankawa understood this too. He wouldn't learn Tsunade's iconic Yin seal or monstrous strength, but regular medical techniques were more than sufficient for now. Moreover, it was a chance to grow closer to her. Who knew? One day, she might officially take him as her student. Given her current state, living alone without Shizen due to certain circumstances, it wasn't impossible if he impressed her enough. Thank you, Lady Tsunade, Hankawa said tactfully. After each medical ninjutsu lesson, I'll go with you to the casino. Not bad. Fair enough. Tsunade laughed, ruffling his hair affectionately. Hankawa's expression turned helpless. Please, stop with the head pats. Ha ha ha, you're so fun. Seeing his reaction, Tsunade laughed even harder. Her body swayed back and forth with laughter, her white valley rising and falling in a way that made Hankawa avert his eyes in embarrassment. Eat. Tsunade turned back to the table, attacking the dishes and drinks with gusto. Hankawa picked up his chopsticks and began eating as well. The blend of alcohol and the aroma of food in the air grew even stronger. Lady Tsunade, Hankawa said after a brief hesitation, snatching the sake bottle from her hand, you've had enough to drink. We should head back now. Having lived 2 lives, he knew just how troublesome drunk people could be. And he was still a kid. How was he supposed to carry her back if she passed out? What midline horizontal ellipsis? What did you just say? Tsunade swayed slightly, her flushed face radiating heat like a ripened peach. I said, we should go home. Hankawa raised his voice slightly to make sure she heard. Home. Tsunade looked down at him, her eyes unfocused and dreamy. Yes, home, Hankawa repeated. After a pause, he asked, where's your home? My midline horizontal ellipsis home. The word struck a chord deep within Tsunade, and she subconsciously rubbed her eyes. In that moment, she thought of Nawaki, her younger brother. The memory sobered her up significantly. You don't need to worry about me. Just go ahead. Tsunade reached out, trying to grab the sake bottle in Hankawa's hand. No way. Hankawa held it out of her reach, firmly refusing. Give it to me. Tsunade's eyes glinted sharply, exuding an overwhelming aura of authority. I won't. Hankawa, familiar with her personality, stood his ground without fear. You little brat. Tsunade glared at him for a moment before unexpectedly breaking into a laugh. Fine, let's go. Time to sleep. She stood up, settled the bill, and walked out of the tavern with Hankawa. Night had just fallen, and the streets were bustling with people. Upon seeing Tsunade, many greeted her warmly, creating an atmosphere akin to a fan meeting. In the world of ninjas, highly renowned shinobi were akin to celebrities. After walking for a while, Tsunade turned into a quiet alley, leaving the noisy streets behind. Hankawa glanced around, his curiosity piqued. In the original storyline, Tsunade's residence in Konoha was never mentioned, so he had no idea where she lived. Why do you want to learn medical ninjutsu? Tsunade asked casually. Because I'm a fan of yours, Hankawa answered honestly. No, you're not. Tsunade shook her head. Your reactions don't match those of a fan. I'm just reserved, Hankawa replied with a slight cough. Who are you trying to fool? Tsunade turned to face him, bending down to his eye level. Hankawa froze. Her face, slightly flushed from the alcohol, still radiated youthful beauty. Her slender waist bent gracefully, her chest strained to its limits, and her entire presence exuded a mature and seductive charm. I midline horizontal ellipsis. Hankawa hesitated, then opted for a different approach. I want to become Hokage. The overly ideal response momentarily surprised Tsunade. She ruffled his hair with force, chuckling. How boring. If it's boring, why are you still ruffling my hair? Hankawa could only grit his teeth in silence. Tell the truth, and you don't believe me. Lie, and you don't believe me either. This is too much. Tsunade withdrew her hand and continued strolling ahead. After passing through a bamboo grove, a row of houses came into view. We're here. Her voice, tinged with drunkenness, was casual. Want to stay over? No, I need to head back, Hankawa declined politely. He hadn't informed Yuhi Shinku or Kurinai beforehand, and staying out would surely worry them. See you tomorrow, Tsunade said nonchalantly, waving him off. She only bothered asking because of Yakushi Nono and today's unexpected good luck. To her, Hankawa hadn't yet reached a level where he truly mattered. Good night, Lady Tsunade, Hankawa replied. As he walked away, he reflected that the day had gone better than expected. If my system were a relationship simulation, I'd probably have cleared the first stage by now. When Hankawa returned home and opened the door, as expected, he was greeted by Kurinai. I was at Konoha Hospital today and met Lady Tsunade, he said with a smile. Lady Tsunade. Kurinai's expression immediately turned excited. What happened? Tell me everything. She was the real fan. To be precise, Tsunade had immense influence among kunoichi. In the original story, characters like Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka regarded Tsunade as their idol. Yuhi Shinku couldn't help but feel something strange. How does this kid keep running into big names? First Minato Namikaze, now Tsunade. Who's next, Hiruzen Sarutobi? But that wasn't a bad thing. Hankawa had already entered the radar of Konoha's elite. As long as he proved himself capable, countless opportunities would come his way. 28. Gambling Prodigy Monday morning. Hankawa followed his usual routine, running first, then practicing swordsmanship. On his way past the Konoha Knowledge Bookstore, he stopped by and received some good news. Tsuchibashi had found a novelist to start writing the Demon Slayer ninjas. According to the storyline, the Demon Slayer ninjas would be divided into 3 volumes, upper, middle, and lower. If things progressed quickly, the first volume might even be published next week. After completing his training in the Konoha-style swordsmanship, Hankawa took a shower and headed to school with Kurinai Yuhi. They arrived relatively early, with only about a third of the classroom seats occupied. Among those who were earlier, many were scrambling to finish homework, occasionally sneaking glances to copy from others. After greeting Kurinai, Hankawa returned to his seat. He casually pulled out a medical book and began reading. May I bother you for a moment? A clear voice rang out. Hankawa looked up to see Rin Noera. I'd like to ask you about a question, Rin said, stating her purpose. Her gaze instinctively shifted to the medical book in Hankawa's hands. What is this? Does the academy even have such a textbook? What's the question? Hankawa asked, slightly surprised. Unlike Obito Uchiha, Rin Nohara's grades were excellent. In the previous 3 monthly exams, her theoretical scores consistently ranked in the top 3. Hankawa, being a transfer student, had only participated in 1 exam and treated it more like a warm-up. The upcoming monthly exam, the long-awaited final exam, was what truly excited him. This one. Rin bent over and spread her notebook open. There are 4 ways to solve this, Hankawa said, casually picking up a pen. It's like this, and also this. Rin's eyes widened in disbelief. 4 different solutions. All done. Anything else you don't understand? Hankoa tapped the notebook lightly as a closing gesture. No, nothing else, Rin replied, regaining her composure. She added earnestly, thank you. With this minor episode over, Hankoa returned to his medical book. Rin went back to her seat. After finishing her homework, she couldn't help but daydream, her gaze unconsciously drifting toward Hankoa. Good-looking and a genius. I wonder if I could be friends with him. And is that book really a medical textbook? Rin had always dreamed of becoming a medical ninja. But she never imagined Hankoa would already be studying medical ninjutsu in his first year. The bell rang, signaling the start of class. As expected, Obito Uchiha was late, again. The morning's lesson was ninja code. As ninjas, one must have an iron will, especially during missions, and avoid all temptations. Time flew by, and soon it was dusk. As the school day neared its end, the classroom atmosphere became restless, no one was paying attention to the lecture. Asuma Sarutobi glanced at Hankoa and Kurenai and clenched his teeth. I'll get up at 8 a.m. Though he wanted another duel with Hankoa, what he desired most was to win, not to lose repeatedly. He decided to spend this time training under Hiruzen Sarutobi to ensure victory before challenging Hankoa again. Until then, he could only endure. Asuma sighed deeply. Is this the price of growth? Obito nudged Rin with his elbow, whispering, where should we hang out after school? Pay attention to class, Rin reminded him softly. Suddenly, her gaze froze, and her pupils slightly contracted. That is. Obito Uchiha followed Rin's gaze toward the doorway. In the dim golden sunlight stood a figure, effortlessly drawing everyone's attention without saying a word. It's Lady Tsunade, Kakashi Hatake remarked, briefly stunned. Rin Noera instinctively covered her mouth, her heart pounding as though it would leap out of her chest. She was seeing the legendary Lady Tsunade in person. Sue. Shizun, overwhelmed, unconsciously patted Hankoa's arm but couldn't form a complete sentence. Is it really that big a deal? Hankoa asked, clearly puzzled. That's Lady Tsunade. Shizun exclaimed, her gaze fixed on the legendary Kunoichi. The greatest female ninja in the ninja world. The greatest? Hankoa thought to himself. She is indeed the greatest. He couldn't bear to tell Shizun the truth. Tsunade showing up at this time likely meant her gambling itch had flared up again, and she needed his help to deal with it. The classroom inevitably descended into chaos. Asuma Sarutobi, however, remained calm. As the son of the Hokage, he had met the 3 legendary Sannin countless times. Watching his classmates act so starstruck gave him a sense of superiority. Tsunade narrowed her eyes slightly, scanning the room until her gaze landed on Hankoa. Lady Tsunade, the teacher, Ichiro, quickly put on a respectful demeanor. How long until class ends? Tsunade asked casually. It can end right now, Ichiro replied after a brief pause, then asked, is there something you need? He quickly reviewed the profiles of all the students in the class but couldn't find anyone with a known connection to Tsunade. Was she here for Asuma Sarutobi? I'm here for Hankoa, Tsunade said calmly. Ichiro felt a jolt in his heart. Hankoa. He has a connection with Lady Tsunade. Hankoa. Ichiro called out loudly. Come outside. Asuma Sarutobi's expression stiffened. Why is it always Hankawa? What's going on? Obito muttered in confusion. Kakashi frowned slightly. Could it be that Hankawa had already started learning medical ninjutsu? If that were true, then the upcoming final exams would be even more challenging than Kakashi had anticipated. Even Kakashi, a recognized genius, suddenly felt the pressure mounting. Rin thought back to the medical book Hankawa had been reading that morning. Her initial shock gave way to admiration. Under everyone's gaze, Hankawa walked to the door. Let's go, Tsunade said simply, turning on her heel. Hankawa followed her without hesitation. The classroom buzzed with chatter after a brief silence. Ichiro chose not to intervene. There were only a few minutes left until class officially ended. Why did Lady Tsunade look for Hankawa? Could it be to teach him medical ninjutsu? Hankawa is amazing. Thanks to Tsunade's reputation, the students couldn't stop speculating. What's the big deal? Asuma Sarutobi finally snapped, standing up in frustration. The students nearby looked at him with amused expressions. Under their gazes, Asuma's body tensed, filled with indignation. It's just Tsunade. Next time, I'll bring the Hokage himself to show you all. Meanwhile, Hankawa and Tsunade had left the school. As expected, the direction they were heading was straight toward the gambling hall. How does it feel to be the center of attention? Tsunade asked, a teasing grin on her face. Feeling on top of the world yet? Not really, Hankawa replied casually. A bunch of 6-year-old kids wasn't enough to excite him. Such an arrogance. Tsunade stopped in her tracks, reached out, and ruffled his hair vigorously. Stop acting like a grown-up. I'm just telling the truth, Hankawa said with a resigned tone. I lost 500,000 ryo today, Tsunade grumbled, rolling her eyes at him. If you don't win it back for me, I'll spank you. No problem, Hankawa replied with confidence. If someone like Chinpeng Zhao could turn 20 million into hundreds of billion, winning back 500,000 was no issue for him. Founder of Binance Crypto Exchange, after all, he wasn't just a gambling prodigy, he was the gambling god. 29. Whoa, what's going on? Hankawa managed to save himself from a spanking. With the gambling god trade on his side, winning the 500,000 ryo was a certainty, even Jesus couldn't intervene. What do you want for dinner? Tsunade twirled the money she had just won in her hand, looking smug. Paired with that question, someone might have mistaken her for planning to spoil Hankawa. Barbecue, Hankawa said without hesitation. Tsunade's victory was at least 1/3 thanks to him. After gambling for so long, why shouldn't he enjoy himself? No problem. Tsunade grinned and reached out to ruffle his hair again. Can we stop with the head pats already? Hankawa instinctively pushed her arm, but it didn't budge. Not bad strength. Tsunade noticed his effort and raised an eyebrow slightly. This strength boost was due to the ninja tool throwing training, but she didn't know that. This way, Tsunade said, grabbing his small hand and leading him across the street. A warm, soft sensation enveloped his hand. Hankawa glanced at their clasped hands and quickened his pace. They soon arrived at the barbecue restaurant. Lady Tsunade. The moment they entered, a voice called out. Hankawa instinctively turned toward the sound. It was Inoichi Yamanaka. Beside him were two other young men, one a red-haired, heavy-set guy, and the other with a pineapple-shaped hairstyle. Though this was Hankawa's first time meeting them, he immediately guessed their identities, Choza Akimichi and Shikaku Nara. Together with Inoichi, they were the iconic Ino, Shika, Cho trio. Inoichi represents the boar, Ino. Choza represents the butterfly, Cho. Shikaku represents the deer, Shika. Lady Tsunade, we've already ordered meat. How about joining us? Inoichi offered politely after a brief exchange of greetings. Tsunade gave a slight nod. Like Hankawa, she had no concept of being reserved. Is this Tsunade-sama's new student? Shikaku asked, studying Hankawa curiously. No, Tsunade replied, he's a child from Nono's orphanage. I'm just helping out. You're helping. Shikaku recalled all the stories he'd heard about Tsunade and couldn't help feeling a bit skeptical. Did the memory extraction help last time? Tsunade casually asked Inoichi. No, Inoichi sighed. Although he saw the murderer, the killer was wearing a mask. A mask? Tsunade frowned. Don't tell me it's that disgusting old guy, Danzo, again. Her disdain for Danzo Shimura was obvious. To Tsunade, Danzo was like a sewer rat, always lurking in the shadows, doing despicable things. There's no evidence at the moment, Inoichi replied, wiping the cold sweat from his brow. Tsunade might have the guts to openly criticize Danzo, but they didn't. If Danzo decided to target them, the Ino, Shika, Cho clan would face serious losses again. Danzo's root organization had already stolen countless young talents from their clans. Hankawa glanced at Tsunade thoughtfully. As Lu Sun famously said, for forbidden jutsu, ask Tobarama Senju. For scapegoats, blame Danzo Shimura. This time, Tsunade's guess was half right. One of the masterminds was indeed Danzo Shimura. Hankawa pondered for a moment. In the original story, when Hiruzen Sarutobi discovered Danzo's involvement, he didn't punish him. Instead, he merely took Yamato, Tenzo, away. Telling Tsunade about this wouldn't achieve much. Not only would it fail to explain how he knew, but it would also provoke Danzo. At that point, Hankawa might suffer immensely without any reprieve. The only valuable outcome here was Yamato. Although his wood release didn't compare to Hashirama Senju's, it still held a unique significance for Tsunade. I'll find a chance to tell Tsunade later. After finishing a barbecue meal, Hankawa returned home with Tsunade. They didn't do anything special, just pure focus on learning medical ninjutsu. Time quickly flew by, and soon it was Saturday. Over the past 5 days, Hankawa had done only 3 things: train, and more training. At Konoha Hospital, Hankawa was practicing swordsmanship on the open grounds outside Nono Yakushi's office. Since it was Saturday, he had come early in the morning. Of course, before practicing swordsmanship, he treated the koi fish he had been healing. After using up most of his chakra, he stepped outside to train in Konoha-style swordsmanship. Time passed unnoticed, but suddenly, 4 lines of text appeared before his eyes. It's here. Hankawa's spirits soared. At last, he had unlocked it. E-rank ninjutsu trait, sword ninja, unlocked, trigger condition, achieved beginner level in Konoha-style swordsmanship. Effect, increases the power of Konoha-style swordsmanship by 10%. Note, further mastery can promote the trait to D-rank Sword Genin. A straightforward and effective ability with a clear progression path. Hankoa nodded in satisfaction. After reaching beginner level comes proficiency, then mastery. Once he mastered it, he figured he would be at the level of a special Jonin. In addition to the sword ninja trait, the progress bar for 7 ninja tools also surged forward. Now that his swordsmanship had reached beginner level, his proficiency with a katana fulfilled the requirement. The 7 ninja tools progress bar was at 90%, only 1 tool left to complete. Inside Nono Yakushi's office, is he tired yet? Tsunade asked as she watched Hankoa pause. Can a kid handle learning so much at once? I've advised him to take it easy, but he insists he's fine, Nono said helplessly. Hankoa's training regimen was something most genin couldn't match. And he wasn't just focusing on one skill, he was learning genjutsu, swordsmanship, and medical ninjutsu all at once. Tsunade suddenly made a surprised sound. Hankoa had resumed practicing his swordsmanship, but this time, it was different. His movements had become exceptionally fluid and refined, as though he had just experienced a breakthrough. With her sharp eyes, Tsunade could tell that Hankoa's current skill level in Konoha-style swordsmanship had already surpassed most genin. Nono noticed as well, her face filled with astonishment. It seemed that true geniuses defied common sense. Well, looks like there's nothing to worry about, Tsunade said, withdrawing her gaze and reclining on the sofa. Crossing her legs, the tight fabric of her pants stretched over her thighs, emphasizing their fullness. I'll get back to work, Lady Tsunade, Nono said, used to Tsunade's casual demeanor. She gave a polite nod before leaving. While Hankoa practiced swordsmanship, the Konoha bookstore was unusually lively. At the entrance, a striking poster was displayed. The poster featured 3 female ninjas. The one in the center was wrapped in a tight purple bodysuit, carrying a katana and boasting an explosive figure. The one on the left wore a black bodysuit, her fair legs exposed. The one on the right stood with her back turned, revealing a beautiful bare back and shapely hips. Beneath the poster, bold orange letters spelled out the title, Demon Slayer Ninjas. In smaller text below, it read, from the genius new novelist Rika Ken, an unmissable adult novel. The eye-catching poster drew an endless stream of customers. Driven by curiosity, they opened Demon Slayer Ninjas and were captivated by its content. Just then, a man wearing a red haori and a forehead protector with the kanji 4 oil stopped in his tracks. He stared at the poster, his eyes widening in shock. What the? So bold. Well, I have to give it a read to see what it's like. 30, Rin, what are you doing? Jiraiya walked into the bookstore without hesitation. As one of Konoha's legendary sannin, he felt it was his duty to investigate and critique this phenomenon. So crowded. Jiraiya looked at the bookstore packed with customers, his curiosity growing stronger. It didn't seem like mere clickbait, there was substance here. Weaving through the crowd, he quickly managed to grab a copy of the book. His presence didn't cause much of a stir. Despite his fame, in such a harmonious setting of mutual interests, his reputation held little sway. When it came to matters like this, men shared a silent camaraderie. Jiraiya casually flipped open Demon Slayer Ninjas and began to read. Moments later, his expression changed. It felt as if the door to a new world had been opened, he'd been missing out for 30 years. In the ninja world, Most popular novels were grounded in reality, revolving around standard ninja themes. But Demon Slayer Ninjas was different, heralding a new genre. Set in a near-future world with a sci-fi twist, it featured a bold, seductive heroine, fighting unheard of demonic creatures. This novel is absolutely delightful, Jiraiya exclaimed with excitement. It reminded him of the thrill he felt during his first visit to a tavern, accompanied by two lovely hostesses, anticipation, excitement, and irresistible allure. But what happens next? Reaching the end of the book, Jiraiya groaned in frustration. Why isn't there more? This is unacceptable. After taking several deep breaths to calm himself, he reflected on his own writing. Since publishing Tales of a Gutsy Ninja, he had been searching for inspiration for his next work but had been at a loss. Reading Demon Slayer Ninjas had ignited a burst of creativity within him. With newfound inspiration, Jiraiya left the bookstore, book in hand. He was ready to start writing again. At Konoha Hospital, Hankawa paused his sword practice. E-rank talent trait, hero, trigger condition, publication of Demon Slayer Ninjas, effect, enhances memory by 10%. Note, publishing more novels can promote the trait to D-rank novelist. This works too. He couldn't deny it, everyone has moments when they long for a hero to appear. The kind who leaves behind a trail of mystery before disappearing in style. But just to clarify, no gourd babies or Journey to the West. Let's keep it unique. Closing his eyes, Hankawa noticed that previously vague knowledge had become clearer, and what he had already memorized now stood out in perfect detail. Excellent. Now he was confident he could secure the top spot in the upcoming theoretical exams. Done practicing? Tsunade leaned out the window and asked. Are you going gambling again? Take a break for once, Hankawa replied, unable to resist teasing her. You're so annoying, kid. Clenching her fist, Tsunade glared at him. Are you coming or not? I'm coming. Hankawa quickly conceded. Good boy. Tsunade closed the window, stepped out in her heels, and approached him. Shall we go now? Wait, I have one condition. Hankawa suddenly had an idea. Lady Tsunade, can you teach me how to use a scalpel? A scalpel? Tsunade narrowed her eyes. You're too young to be a lead medical ninja. Medical ninja scalpels come in two forms, traditional scalpels and chakra scalpels. The chakra scalpel, classified as an A-rank medical ninjutsu, was typically mastered only by Jonin-level ninjas. I don't mean for surgery. I just want to familiarize myself with its use in advance, Hankawa clarified. Is that so? After a brief pause, Tsunade agreed. All right. Thank you, Lady Tsunade. Hankawa breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Anyone could teach the basics of using a scalpel, but learning from Tsunade herself carried a certain authority and trustworthiness. That evening Hankawa followed Tsunade home. They had just left the casino and stopped for a feast along the way. The use of a scalpel isn't too difficult, Tsunade remarked. Tsunade took out a scalpel and said, what's difficult is precision, especially during surgery, you can't afford even the slightest deviation. Hankawa stood before her, listening intently and mimicking her movements. Their practice subject? A live chicken Tsunade had bought earlier from a tavern. After being meticulously cut apart, the chicken ultimately became their midnight snack. Say what you will, but Tsunade's roast chicken skills were top-notch. The kid approves, Hankoa thought, silently giving her a 5-star review. The weekend passed in a blend of gambling and training. A new week began. The notable difference? It was now March, the final month of Hankoa's first year at the academy. In other words, Hankoa was about to graduate from a first-year elementary student to a second-year one. What a momentous occasion, he thought sarcastically. Suddenly, Kakashi Hatake came to mind. According to the timeline of the original story, Kakashi graduated from the academy in just 1 year, becoming a genin immediately after. With Hankoa's current strength, he could also graduate early. But that's way too dangerous. Why did Kakashi graduate so quickly, yet still end up forming a team with Obito Uchiha and Rin Noara later? Because his earlier teammates midline horizontal ellipsis all died. Every single one of them. Even without deep analysis, it was obvious that staying in the academy was the safer option. Hankoa made up his mind, until I become a master swordsman, I'm not graduating. Hankoa. A familiar voice broke his train of thought. Looking up, he saw Rin Noara standing shyly in front of him. I don't understand this question, she said hesitantly. Can you help me? One time turned into many. Ever since Hankoa had taught her 4 different writing techniques last time, she had come to him for help with difficult questions. There was another reason, though, Tsunade. Let me see. Hankoa opened her notebook, thought for a moment, and said, this one's a bit tricky. Listen carefully. Meanwhile, in the hallway outside the classroom, Obito Uchiha walked with excitement and determination. He had arrived unusually early today. The elderly woman he usually helped cross the street had no errands for him this morning. Rin is going to be so surprised, he thought, grinning broadly. Quickening his pace, he entered the classroom, and froze. Unbelievable. Obito stared at Hankoa and Rin, chatting and laughing together. The smile vanished from his face. Snapping out of his shock, he rushed over, asking urgently, Rin, what are you two doing? Obito. Rin turned to him in surprise. When did you get here? Hankoa was equally taken aback. Obito Uchiha midline horizontal ellipsis not late for once. Hankoa's explaining a question to me, Rin explained. Is he any good? Obito frowned. He recalled that in last month's theory exam, Hankoa's scores were mediocre, far below Rin's. He's very good. Rin blurted out, her sincerity showing. I can do it too. Obito declared quickly, catching her expression. Huh? Rin tilted her head, confused. Obito was known as the class clown, consistently 31. Throwing a kunai from 800 meters away, Rin Noara noticed Obito Uchiha's awkwardness. He stood there, visibly sweating bullets. Well, midline horizontal ellipsis Obito, let Hankoa explain it. You go ahead and take care of something else, Rin said tactfully, retrieving her notebook. I'm not clueless. I just midline horizontal ellipsis, Obito stammered, his neck stiff and his face flushed as he tried to explain. What followed was an incoherent string of excuses, something about it being too easy, and wanting to explain it to her alone. The atmosphere in and around the classroom grew increasingly lively. Kurenai Yuhi couldn't hold back her laughter. Though seated far away, she had been keeping an eye on Hankoa and overheard Obito's awkward exchange. What could she say? There was no malice in her amusement, she simply found his remarks inexplicably funny. It wasn't just her, those near Obito, like Shizun, also chuckled softly. The only exception was Asuma Sarutobi, who looked on sympathetically. He's too familiar with the pain of losing someone he cherishes. Asuma sighed and shook his head, feeling as though there was an insurmountable wall of sorrow separating him from them. It hurts. It hurts so much. But giving up wasn't an option for him either. Hankawa's lip twitched. Obito, Rin called, her tone tinged with embarrassment. I'll midline horizontal ellipsis. I'll go back to my seat. You focus on your work. Obito shot Hankawa a glare before storming off. Sorry about that, Rin said apologetically, offering a soft smile. That's just how he is, sometimes impulsive, but he's a good person. No problem. Let's continue, Hankawa replied, unbothered. For now, he wasn't worried about Obito causing trouble. With his current strength and the fact that Rin was still alive, Obito didn't pose a threat. If anything, Hankawa hoped Obito would challenge him, it'd be a chance to spar. Who knows, he might even gain a fire release talent from it. The real concerns were Madara Uchiha and Black and White Zetsu. By this point in the timeline, they had likely already set their sights on Obito. Thank you, Rin said sincerely before returning to her seat. Obito, now at his desk, finally felt relieved. Clenching his fists, he vowed to work harder and improve. But then he looked at a math problem and thought, forget it. This isn't for me. If theory wasn't his strength, he'd have to rely on his combat skills. The upcoming practical exam at the end of the semester might just be his chance. Hankawa, oblivious to Obito's thoughts, packed up and left the classroom after school. He exchanged a quick goodbye with Kurenai Yuhi before heading to Tsunade's house. His 7 ninja tools skill progress bar was down to just 2%. With a bit of effort, he could finally master it today. On his way, Hankawa paused in front of the Leaf Village bookstore. Why is it so crowded? Seeing the line of customers waiting to buy books, he thought to himself, this is great. The profits should be decent. Hankawa already had a plan for his first paycheck, forging a sword. He'd been practicing the Konoha-style swordsmanship with a wooden sword, but that wouldn't suffice in actual combat. Asking Kurenai's father, Yuhi Shinku, for money didn't feel right, he had already helped Hankawa too much. Hankawa rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I wonder if I can afford a chakra metal katana. Chakra metal, a material known for its ability to channel chakra more effectively and enhance both power and range, was highly sought after. Naturally, it was also incredibly expensive. In the original story, Asuma Sarutobi was one of the few characters who wielded chakra metal blades. Hankawa figured they weren't something Asuma bought himself but rather a gift from his father, Hiruzen Sarutobi. With that thought, Hankawa crossed the street and soon arrived at Tsunade's home. He had been here so often that he was now quite familiar with the route. Tsunade's house, technically the former residence of Hashirama Senju and Mito Uzumaki, was situated between the Hokage Rock and the Konoha Hospital. Hankawa raised his hand to knock on the door, but no one answered. Out gambling again? Or at the hospital? At this hour, gambling seemed like the more likely option. Standing on the open ground in front of the door, Hankawa took out his wooden sword and began practicing the Konoha-style swordsmanship to improve his proficiency. The Konoha-style swordsmanship was a comprehensive system, but in the original series, two moves were especially powerful. 1. Konoha-style, Willow, created by Marizoshi Kosuka. 2. Dance of the Crescent Moon, used by Hayate Gecko and Yugao Yuzuki. Unfortunately, Hankawa couldn't learn the Willow technique since it was a unique creation of Marizoshi Kosuka. However, Dance of the Crescent Moon was achievable, just not yet. The technique required Shadow Clone Jutsu, which he hadn't mastered. Suddenly, Hankawa raised an eyebrow. An earthquake? He instinctively turned around and saw Tsunade, her face dark with irritation. With a light stomp of her foot, she crushed a stone on the ground into powder, and the earth beneath her cracked like an eggshell. When did you get here? Tsunade's expression softened slightly as she spotted Hankawa. Just a few minutes ago, Hankawa replied, blinking. I'm free tomorrow, so I can go to the casino. He figured he would unlock the 7 ninja tools ability today, so taking half a day off wouldn't hurt. Tsunade paused, visibly surprised. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, then flicked Hankawa's forehead lightly. While I like gambling, I'm not that obsessed, she said with a laugh. Hankawa almost said something but stopped himself. No way. That statement has zero credibility. Who was it that interrupted his class just to drag him to a gambling den? But he didn't dare say it aloud. One forehead flick from Tsunade could be fatal. Her feats of monstrous strength were well documented. Come on, let's go inside. Tsunade brushed off her earlier irritation, grinning excitedly. We'll finish today, and tomorrow, casino time. That's a quicker mood swing than those 2,000 yen teammates of yours. Hankawa looked up and saw Tsunade at the entrance, changing her shoes. She leaned slightly against the wall, left hand bracing herself. Her body bent slightly, revealing the curve of her hips as she stretched her right arm to remove a shoe. Her pale, delicate soul flashed briefly before pressing onto the carpet. Don't just stand there, hurry up, Tsunade called back, walking barefoot into the living room. Coming, Hankawa replied, following her inside. As before, they each grabbed scalpels and began dissecting a live chicken. An hour later, Hankawa felt a tremor run through his body as a string of text appeared before his eyes. E-rank talent, 7 ninja tools, unlocked, trigger condition, basic mastery of 7 ninja tools. Effect, increases the power of all ninja tools by 10%. You've met the synthesis requirements for the D-rank talent, Ninja Tool Mastery. Would you like to synthesize? Note, synthesis does not erase non-overlapping effects of lower-rank talents. Hankawa didn't hesitate and selected synthesis. D-rank talent, Ninja Tool Mastery, unlocked, trigger condition, synthesis of E-rank talents, 7 ninja tools, and tool throwing. Effect, increases arm strength by 30% and automatically provides an 8x zoom effect when using ninja tools. Yes. Hankawa had anticipated the 30% strength boost but hadn't expected the absurd addition of an 8x zoom. Suddenly, the possibility of recreating Kakuzu's legendary kunai throw from 800 meters away seemed entirely plausible. 32. Consider as student Hankawa instinctively looked up at Tsunade, her face reflected in his eyes. At that moment, his right eye twitched, and his entire field of vision transformed. Hankawa was struck with awe, so flawless. Her delicate collarbones, smooth skin, everything was vividly clear under the magnification of his right eye. For most people, Viewing skin under 8x magnification would reveal imperfections not visible to the naked eye. But Tsunade was different. She had the strength of 100 seal, an S-rank medical sealing technique. This technique offered numerous benefits, such as instant healing, enhanced physical attacks, and increased speed. However, its most coveted feature among kunoichi was its ability to maintain the body at peak condition, effectively preserving youth and beauty. Considering Tsunade was only in her 30s, her skin was exceptionally flawless. "What are you staring at?" Tsunade asked, her expression hardening as she noticed his gaze. While she was typically carefree, she took teaching very seriously and never tolerated slacking during lessons. "Yes, ma'am." Hankawa immediately deactivated the 8x zoom. After briefly testing it out, he had a solid grasp of how the ability worked. 1. The 8x zoom activated automatically when holding a ninja tool. Earlier, he had been holding the scalpel, which triggered the effect. Not his fault, blame the system for being so intrusive. 2. Only the right eye had the 8x zoom feature. This wasn't a drawback. If both eyes zoomed in, it would be easy to lose track of nearby targets. With one eye zoomed and the other in normal vision, he could balance long-range and short-range perception. However, adapting to the difference would require practice, as mismatched magnification could cause disorientation. Tsunade squinted slightly, scrutinizing Hankawa. She noticed that his proficiency with the scalpel had improved significantly in just a short time. Although the E-rank talent, 7 ninja tools, had been synthesized into the higher-ranked, ninja tool mastery, its 10% power boost for all tools was still active. Naturally, this included the scalpel. Unaware that Hankawa had a hidden advantage, Tsunade simply attributed his rapid progress to his innate talent. This kid's skills were exceptionally well-rounded, from genjutsu to swordsmanship, and now medical ninjutsu. He was excelling in everything. Tsunade suddenly remembered what Shikaku Nara had said at the barbecue restaurant. A talent like this truly deserved to be her student. But midline horizontal ellipsis, it still wasn't enough. As a medical ninja, what Tsunade valued most was outstanding aptitude in medical ninjutsu. While Hankawa had shown promise, it hadn't been extraordinary enough to convince her that he was irreplaceable. "That's it for tonight," Tsunade said after observing him for a while. "If you want to improve further, you'll need to perform as the lead medical ninja in surgery." "Thank you, Lady Tsunade," Hankawa said sincerely, putting down the scalpel. "It's nothing." Tsunade chuckled softly, reaching out to ruffle his hair. "Honestly, I've benefited more from this arrangement." She was, of course, referring to gambling. The money she had won during this time had already exceeded 1 million ryo. If Hankawa really wanted to learn, he could easily hire a medical ninja as a tutor with that money. Teaching scalpel techniques wouldn't even cost 1 million, probably just 1 or 200,000 ryo. "But you're different, Lady Tsunade," Hankawa said as he smoothed his hair back down. "Oh." Tsunade tilted her head, feigning a cute expression. "How am I different? Why are you pretending, old lady?" Cough. Hankawa's expression turned serious. "Because you're the greatest medical ninja." "You sure know how to talk," Tsunade teased, her red lips curling into a playful smile. "You're going to fool a lot of girls in the future." "That's slander," Hankawa retorted in mock indignation. Tsunade laughed even harder at his response. As Hankawa watched the lively sway of her figure, he was briefly tempted to activate his 8x zoom again, but ultimately refrained, reminding himself that he was a gentleman. After finishing his scalpel lesson, Hankawa bid Tsunade farewell and stepped out of her house. The sky had darkened, but it wasn't completely black thanks to the streetlights. He glanced at a street lamp in the distance and activated his 8x zoom. After a series of tests, he had a better understanding of its range. Objects within 200 meters were the clearest. Beyond that, the image became increasingly blurry, and after 400 meters, it was no longer effective. Throwing a kunai at someone 800 meters away like Kakuzu did is definitely a challenge, Hankawa mused. He also remembered the exaggerated claim about hitting targets 400 kilometers away, a joke, of course. Hankawa. A voice interrupted his thoughts, and Kurenai Yuhi appeared before him. Were you waiting for me? Hankawa asked. Of course not. Kurenai pouted, placing her hands on her hips. I'm here to announce something. I've mastered demonic illusion, hell viewing technique. Though not quite at Hankawa's level, Kurenai was undeniably a genjutsu prodigy for her age. Impressive. That's amazing, Hankawa said with a smile, recognizing her subtle plea for praise. Of course it is. Kurenai puffed out her chest proudly. Cute. Unable to resist, Hankawa reached out and patted her head. Don't mess up my hair. Kurenai protested, pouting. Got it, Hankawa replied half-heartedly, continuing to ruffle her hair. Turns out, patting someone's head is way more fun than being patted. Frustrated by his persistence, Kurenai shot him a glare before running inside. Hankawa chuckled to himself as he followed her into the house, changing his shoes at the entrance before stepping into the living room. You're back. Kurenai's father, Shinkuro Yuhi, looked up and asked, Did you eat yet? I ate at Lady Tsunade's place, Hankawa replied casually. You've been spending a lot of time with Lady Tsunade lately, Shinkuro said, his curiosity piqued. How's that going? Do you have a chance at becoming her student? Thanks to Tsunade's mentorship, Hankawa had started to attract attention. Combined with his focus on medical ninjutsu, it wasn't surprising that people were speculating about his future. Tsunade was a student of Hiruzen Sarutobi. If Hankawa became her apprentice, he'd automatically be linked to the Hokage lineage, a connection that could skyrocket his prospects. Shinku, of course, would be delighted by such a development. That's a secret, Hankawa replied mysteriously. Shinku was speechless but didn't press further. It was clear the answer wasn't affirmative. I'll teach you a new genjutsu tomorrow, Shinku said after a moment of thought. Medical ninjutsu is useful, but it lacks combat potential. Genjutsu is your true strength. This was true, but it was also an opportunity for the Yuhi clan to promote their expertise in genjutsu. Can we do it the day after tomorrow? Hankawa asked. Lady Tsunade needs me for something tomorrow. Take care of her request first, then, Shinkuro said with a wave of his hand. Hankawa nodded. It had been nearly 2 months since he last studied genjutsu, long overdue for a new lesson. Thankfully, he no longer needed to spend time practicing ninja tool techniques. The D-rank talent, ninja tool mastery he gained earlier had no further synthesis paths, meaning he'd reached the limit of its potential. As a ninja, ninjutsu remained the most critical skill, ninja tools were just foundational. In the late stages of mastery, the usefulness of ninja tools dwindled, serving only as complements to techniques like explosive tags or the flying thunder god jutsu. 33. Your share amid the bustling crowd. Hankawa yawned out of boredom. He shifted his position, finding a more comfortable spot in Tsunade's warm and soft embrace. Yet every time he was about to drift off, the alluring scents around him and the various fascinating sights nearby kept his eyes wide open. At your age, can you even sleep? Hankawa felt a pang of regret. It was a pity his system didn't have features like a phone or a computer, otherwise, he could have killed some time. After gambling with Hankawa a few times, Tsunade realized that as long as he was by her side, her luck would even out. So, claiming that kids shouldn't gamble, she stopped letting him participate. After an indeterminate amount of time, Hankawa heard a loud shout. He perked up instinctively and asked, "Is it over?" "Yep." Tsunade's lips curled into a slight smile. Clearly in a good mood, she said, "My treat, let's have some tender chicken." "All right." The mention of tender chicken immediately made Hankawa's stomach growl with hunger. The two left the casino and headed to a nearby izakaya. "Come again, sir." A coquettish voice rang out. Hankawa instinctively turned his head. Wow, talk about dedication. Though it was March and not as cold as winter, it was still chilly. Yet the young woman, with her curvy figure, was wearing a very revealing kimono that looked almost like some kind of armor fetish outfit. Ha ha ha. I'll definitely come back tomorrow. Beside her stood a silver-haired young man, slapping her rear with a lecherous grin. Hankawa froze slightly. Not good. There's killing intent. He looked up at Tsunade, whose expression had darkened considerably. It was Jiraiya. Hankawa instantly guessed the identity of the silver-haired man. How carefree. Singing, drinking, and flirting around. Hankawa furrowed his brow and stepped back behind Tsunade. He didn't need to guess what was about to happen. I'm so smart. Why does this feel familiar? Jiraiya scratched his head. Suddenly, his expression changed, and he quickly turned around. Seeing Tsunade, his drunkenness disappeared instantly, leaving him wide awake. Jiraiya's face turned pale as a sheet. Stay calm, and beg for mercy. Tsunade, this is all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Jiraiya plastered on a smile and hastily explained. Bam! Tsunade clenched her fist and punched him squarely. Jiraiya's body flew backward, slamming into a wall and forming a shape. Let's go. Tsunade cast him a cold glance, grabbed Hankawa's hand, and walked away. Pfft. Pfft. Jiraiya spat out some dust and got up from the ground. Watching Tsunade's retreating figure, he looked like he was about to cry. Finally, a chance to have some fun, and I run into her. Why? But who's that kid? Recently, aside from working with Minato Namikaze on the Rasengan, Jiraiya had been busy writing his new novel. Guided by his mentor, Thunderfire Blade, inspiration seemed to flow endlessly. He hadn't paid any attention to Hankawa before, so he didn't recognize him. He's Jiraiya. Tsunade spoke with clear displeasure. Don't learn from him. I won't. Hankawa quickly promised. At least not now. Maybe when I can beat her in a fight someday. Here, this is for you. Tsunade's tone softened as she handed him a bankbook. Midline horizontal ellipsis. Hankoa glanced at the bankbook, then looked at her in surprise. What's with that look? Tsunade huffed lightly and said, 600,000 ryo. Your share. I just didn't expect it. Closing the bankbook, Hankoa spoke with a hint of disbelief. I'm not so low as to take a kid's money. Tsunade rolled her eyes and emphasized, I am one of the legendary Sannin, after all. Am I the first person to ever get money from you? Hankoa asked curiously. What are you talking about? Tsunade was a bit annoyed and asked in return, is that how you see me? Yes. But Hankoa didn't dare to say it, afraid he might get beaten to death. You're the second. Tsunade picked up her drink and said, stop with the nonsense and drink. The first was Nawaki. As for everyone else, they were all people who lent her money and never got it back. It wasn't that Tsunade didn't want to pay them back, it was that she didn't have the money to do so. Before meeting Hankoa, her gambling life was a series of losses, losing everything until she was completely broke. How could she have had anything left to repay her debts? Hankoa watched her drinking and couldn't help but smile. Apart from her fists, everything about her is soft. As he ate, he pondered what to do with the money. Besides forging a sword, he didn't have any pressing need for it. And he was certain that the earnings from Demon Slayer ninjas would be several times the 600,000 ryo. An idea suddenly came to him. After dinner, Tsunade, her face flushed from drinking, waved him over before walking toward home. Lady Tsunade, the lamppost. Hankoa reminded her. Tsunade swayed her head, realizing she was veering off course and had almost walked into a lamppost. Her dazed expression had an unexpectedly cute contrast. Hankoa withdrew his gaze, crossed the tree-lined avenue, and arrived at the shopping district. After a spree of shopping, he returned home. Hankoa pushed open the door and dropped 2 large bags onto the floor, creating a thud. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. Thanks to the 30% arm strength bonus from his tool mastery, he had managed to carry it all back. What's this? Yuhi Shinku asked with a puzzled expression. Behind him, a curious Yuhi Kurenai peeked out, looking adorably innocent. Gifts for you too. Hankoa waved to Kurenai and said, the bag on the left is for you. What is it? Kurenai's cheeks turned slightly pink with excitement. She ran up to Hankoa, opened the bag, and immediately let out a cheer. Shinku glanced over and was momentarily stunned. Toys, snacks, clothes, everything a little girl might like was inside. He had never bought so many things for Kurenai. Where did you get the money? Shinku asked, confused. From partnering with Lady Tsunade, Hankoa replied with a smile. Uncle Shinku, the other bag is for you. Partnering? Shinku opened the bag, a flicker of emotion flashing in his eyes. Compared to Kurenai's gifts, his were clearly more expensive. But why were there ginseng, antler velvet, and deer penis among the items? You've spent too much, Hankoa. Shinku came back to his senses and said with a sigh. Consider it tuition. Hankoa shrugged, unbothered. Very well. Shinku's energy returned, and he said, tonight, I'll teach you a new genjutsu. A few minutes later, his expression turned numb and filled with disbelief. Hankoa was learning too quickly. Excuse me, but I couldn't make this challenging enough for you. D-rank jutsu entry, Fox Mind technique, trigger condition, successfully perform the jutsu. Effect: this jutsu automatically reaches proficiency level. Previously, Hankoa had learned 3 E-rank genjutsu, but this one was D-rank. In terms of effects, it was indeed superior. It caused the person trapped in the illusion to wander aimlessly, as if bewitched by a fox. By the time they snapped out of it, they would have expended significant stamina. Moreover, it was an area genjutsu. People often say foxes are tricksters, but this one felt more like a blessing. 34. A heartbreaker who toys with emotions mourning. Tsunade woke up. She pressed her forehead, feeling a headache. Although she was a ninja, she never used chakra to sober up when drinking, so she often dealt with hangovers. Tsunade glanced down. Her clothes were half undone, revealing a large expanse of fair skin. Her chest subtly rose and fell with her breathing. She vaguely remembered that she had fallen asleep while taking off her clothes halfway through last night. Tsunade didn't mind. She casually fixed her outfit. After all, she was alone at home, so there was no risk of exposing herself to anyone. Tsunade suddenly caught a whiff of a pleasant aroma coming from the living room. Her body tensed slightly as she prepared for an attack. Why is it you? Tsunade opened the door and saw Hankoa. Good morning, Lady Tsunade. Hankoa greeted her with a wave, adding, I came to bring you breakfast, and I also brought a gift. Tsunade glanced at the rice balls on the table and then at the large bag of gifts on the floor, her face showing curiosity. Salmon rice balls, Hankoa explained casually. They're a bit pricey, but they taste pretty good. What's the occasion? Tsunade picked up a rice ball, took a bite, and asked. They're from the 600,000 ryo you gave me yesterday, Hankoa said, smiling. It's my first significant sum of money, so I wanted to buy some meaningful gifts. Then why give them to me? Tsunade chewed the rice ball, her pink tongue lightly licking her lips. Because I'm kind. Hankoa fabricated a reason. In Konoha, there are only 4 people I'm close to, the orphanage director, Uncle Shinku, Kurenai, and you. He had spent about 300,000 ryo on gifts for Tsunade, Yuhi Shinku, and Kurenai. As for the remaining 300,000 ryo, he planned to donate it to Nono Yakushi and the orphanage. Tsunade paused her movements, feeling a rare trace of warmth. Her thoughts affirmed what she had said the day before, this little guy would definitely deceive many girls in the future. Did you spend all your money? Tsunade finished the rice ball in a few bites and picked up a second one. Yep. Hankoa nodded but quickly added, but there's no need for you to give me more, Lady Tsunade. I didn't say I was giving you more money, Tsunade said, her lips curving into a sly smile. What I meant is, after breakfast, we're heading to the casino. Give me back my moment of emotion. Hankoa was furious. She was outright toying with his feelings, a heartbreaker. I have school to attend. You can gamble on your own. Hankoa stood up and declared. See you later, kid, Tsunade said with a mischievous grin. 10 minutes later, at the school gates, good morning. Hankoa had just arrived at school when he ran into Sarutobi Asuma. It's not morning anymore. Asuma huffed in response, sounding mildly annoyed. He was just a kid, after all. Hankoa bore no ill will toward him. After all, Asuma was simply rebellious, not an outright villain like Uchiha Obito. As for Kurenai, any relationship there was purely consensual. Hankoa had always prided himself on being a defender of pure love. I'm going to challenge you in the final exams. Asuma's gaze sharpened as he made his declaration with determination. You're welcome anytime. Hankoa replied sincerely. He's bringing me free talent points. What a kind soul. Asuma couldn't make sense of Hankoa's reaction. Just you wait. Leaving that remark, Asuma turned and walked away. Hankoa was about to follow him into the classroom when he suddenly heard someone calling his name. He turned around and saw Kakashi Hatake. Morning. Hankoa greeted Kakashi as usual. I'm planning to graduate early, Kakashi Hatake stated bluntly, getting straight to the point. Hankoa found it odd. Graduating early was fine, but why was Kakashi telling him about it? Before graduating, I want to spar with you, Kakashi revealed his purpose. Hankoa was a bit surprised. The genius Kakashi was challenging him. Of course, Hankoa agreed without hesitation. I'm looking forward to it. For him, it was a win-win situation. If he won, great. If he lost, there was no real downside. Why refuse? Kakashi, hands in his pockets, walked away coolly. The bell rang for class to start. Hankoa, as usual, pulled out a medical book. However, unlike before, he didn't bother hiding it behind a textbook. He was openly reading it. Ichiro immediately noticed Hankoa slacking off. He wanted to say something but held back, ultimately deciding to let it go. After all, Hankoa now had connections, a significant one at that. One of the legendary Sannin, Tsunade. How midline horizontal ellipsis, how do you do that? His deskmate Shizun, curious like a child, asked him. Perhaps it's just a bond between men, Hankoa replied nonsensically. In reality, he had taken a shortcut. Midline horizontal ellipsis, of course, Shizun didn't believe him. When class ended, Hankoa closed his medical book. He had been reading for a while and needed to rest his eyes. Hankoa. The next moment, Obito Uchiha appeared before him. He had seized the opportunity to approach while Rin Noara went to the restroom. Recently, the constant studying sessions had pushed him to his limit. Do you need something? Hankoa blinked and asked. I challenge you. Obito declared confidently. At the final exams. Another one? Are you all taking turns? Hankoa didn't mind, it was just another opportunity to outshine them all. Sure, Hankoa nodded slightly. I'm going to defeat you this time. Obito exclaimed, his face lighting up with pride. While he lacked confidence in theory, he was absolutely sure of his abilities in combat. Among first years, only a few could use ninjutsu already, and he was one of them. Good luck, Hankoa replied casually, unfazed. Obito, irritated, turned on his heel and stormed back to his seat. After school, Hankoa went to the orphanage. Where did you get this money? Nono Yakushi stared at the neatly stacked 300,000 ryo, unable to hide her astonishment. Lady Tsunade won it, Hankoa explained. Huh? Nono was taken aback but then gently said, if you don't want to tell me the truth, there's no need to lie to your director. That hit hard. Her calm yet firm words left Hankoa momentarily speechless. He couldn't think of a retort. Please accept it, director, Hankoa finally said in his most sincere tone. It really is from Lady Tsunade. Nono hesitated for a few seconds before nodding. The orphanage indeed needed money. A long time ago, the funding from Konoha had fallen under the control of Danzo Shimura. Nono had to work for him to secure money and safety for the orphanage. Time flew by, and soon it was the end of March. The Ninja Academy entered its most exciting week. Each grade's final exams were scheduled to be completed within this week. For 6th years, it wasn't just a final exam but a graduation test. For other grades, the final exams were split into 2 days, theory on the first day and practical combat on the second. 35. The outlier. Dad, why are you still here? Kurenai Yuhi walked out of the bathroom, rubbing her damp hair. Her small face showed confusion. She had just finished her morning training and was preparing to head to school. Normally, at this hour, her father, Shinku Yuhi, would have already left. Uncle Shinku took the day off to watch our practical exams, Hankawa explained as Kurenai sat down. He picked up a hairdryer and began drying her hair. The theory exam was yesterday, though the results hadn't been announced yet. Today was the practical exam. Shinku Yuhi opened his mouth to speak but stopped himself. Will you two even give me a chance to talk? He couldn't shake the feeling that if this continued, there would be no place for him in his own home. I have something to say to you both. After Kurenai's hair was dry, Shinku finally spoke. We definitely won't disappoint you. Kurenai tilted her chin up, her small face filled with pride. Just wait for the good news. That's not what I wanted to say. Shinku shook his head. I'm familiar with your strengths. But as Genjutsu practitioners, you must remember to know your limits. Huh? Kurenai tilted her head in confusion, looking at him. No matter what, survival is the most important thing, Shinku said earnestly. If you're outmatched, surrender. Don't push yourself unnecessarily and risk getting hurt. But midline horizontal ellipsis, Kurenai felt that what her father said didn't quite align with what their textbooks taught, especially the ideals of the will of fire. Uncle Shinku has a point, Hankawa chimed in. Agreeing. Naruto may be a classic hot-blooded anime, but real life wasn't. Charging into danger while shouting about friendship and bonds would only make someone like Madara Uchiha laugh. Shinku gave Hankawa an approving glance. This kid will definitely survive. Hankawa felt a bit conflicted, knowing that in the original story, Shinku Yuhi died protecting the village during the Ninetales attack. I understand now. Kurenai nodded firmly. If even Hankawa agreed, it had to be true. Let's go. Shinku stood up with a smile. Today should be lively. For students, final exams were incredibly important. The same applied to their parents. Hiruzen Sarutobi rose early that morning. He was organizing the list of mentors for the new graduates. Every year, the Hokage personally assigned team leaders to newly graduated students. The list included both Jonin and Chunin. Graduates from prominent clans or those with exceptional talent would be assigned to Jonin. Ordinary graduates would typically get Chunin mentors. There was no helping it, there simply weren't enough Jonin to go around. Are you ready? Hearing footsteps, Hiruzen looked up. He normally would have gone to the Hokage's office, but this year, he didn't. It was all because of his son, Asuma Sarutobi. Of course. Asuma looked eager and confident. I've been preparing for this day for a whole month. Don't let your guard down. Hiruzen chuckled warmly. I know, Asuma replied with a huff. Then he asked, are you done yet? See, there you go again, getting all anxious, Hiruzen said, slowly rolling up the scroll. Always stay calm, especially during battle. You've said that 1,000,000 times already. Asuma grumbled, clearly annoyed. Hiruzen sighed, feeling a bit exasperated. Why is this kid's personality the complete opposite of his brother's? Who did he pick this up from? The two headed out together. Lord Hokage. Along the way, many people greeted Hiruzen. When they arrived at the academy, Hiruzen was quickly surrounded by a crowd, showcasing his immense popularity as the Hokage. Asuma Sarutobi followed behind Hiruzen Sarutobi, his face gloomy. His father completely stole the spotlight. Even when someone noticed him, all they said was, "Ah, this must be your son. Truly a remarkable young man. How predictable. Wow, you're a genius to have guessed that." Asuma's inner thoughts brimmed with sarcasm. He felt like he could blow up the entire academy with the sheer energy of his suppressed complaints. He glanced at Hiruzen and decided to head straight back to the classroom. Before the practical exam began, there was one more step, announcing the results of yesterday's theory exam. Asuma didn't expect to get first place, but he was confident he'd score higher than Hankawa. After all, Hankawa had ranked near the bottom in the previous theory exam. There was no way he could surpass Asuma in just a month. If he did, Asuma might as well. No, better not make any reckless bets. Kakashi, confident about the theory exam? Before the teacher arrived, Rin Noara found a topic to discuss. More or less, Kakashi replied casually. Same as always. In the past theory exams, Kakashi had always been first. Rin nodded slightly but suddenly glanced at Hankawa, who had just entered the classroom. Maybe midline horizontal ellipsis this time might be different. Over the past month, she had often discussed various difficult problems with Hankawa. She found his knowledge to be far beyond hers. Rin, why didn't you ask me? Obito Uchiha leaned over, blocking her view with a playful grin. How do you feel about it this time? Rin graciously played along and asked him. I feel great. Obito declared confidently. I definitely won't be last. And what difference does that make? Kakashi glanced at him and asked. How does it not make a difference? Obito glared back. Well, at least he's got spirit, Hankawa thought, shaking his head. The classroom was lively, and the area outside wasn't any less so. The most notable presences were Hiruzen Sarutobi and Tsukumo Hataki. Standing off to the side was the teacher, looking like a sidekick. Just then, the bell rang. The teacher breathed a sigh of relief and returned to the classroom. Now, I will announce the rankings for the theory exam. The teacher, with all eyes on him, smiled and said, first place goes to midline horizontal ellipsis Hankawa. Let's congratulate him. He clapped as he spoke, but many students wore expressions as if they'd seen a ghost. Yes. Kurenai Yuhi was overjoyed, as if she herself had taken first place. How could it be Hankawa? Obito clenched his fists instinctively. In the last exam, Hankawa had been right at the bottom with him. How had their positions suddenly reversed? Kakashi's pupils narrowed slightly, and he fell silent. Amazing. Rin's small mouth opened in surprise. Although she had suspected this outcome, seeing it happen still left her in disbelief. Teacher. Asuma abruptly stood up, questioning loudly, "Isn't there some kind of mistake?" Outside the classroom, Hiruzen sighed helplessly. So much for staying calm. Why are you getting so worked up again? That said, Hankawa being first was also unexpected to him. No mistake, the teacher replied with a shake of his head. Asuma bit his lip and slumped back into his seat in defeat. Why is the heavens so unfair to me? You must be cheating, right? Hankawa managed to take first place despite studying 2 months less than everyone else. What does this prove? That hard work pays off. The teacher continued his lesson in earnest. I hope everyone can learn from this and work hard, especially during class midline horizontal ellipsis. He trailed off awkwardly, realizing something. Because during class, Hankawa never paid attention. He was either solving problems or reading extracurricular books. 36. Over in an instant, Ichiro continued announcing the rankings. As expected, the second place went to Kakashi Hatake. But Kakashi couldn't feel happy because he had fallen from first place. However, there was still a chance. The final rankings were determined by combining theory and practical results. As long as he secured first place in the practical exam, the overall ranking could still be undecided. Kakashi looked at Hankawa, his expression calm and composed, as if he had anticipated this outcome all along. This feeling reminded Kakashi of his old self. He unconsciously clenched his fist. The practical exam wouldn't be so easy. Kurenai Yuhi ranked 6th, which was consistent with her usual performance. After hearing the rankings, Hankawa shifted his focus to the system notifications. E-tier talent trait, academic ace, acquired, ... Trigger condition, rank first in theory for the first semester. Effect, plus 10% comprehension ability. Note, achieving more first-place theory results can upgrade this trait to D tier, academic genius. Comprehension ability. Hankawa was briefly stunned. The effect was unexpected. But upon reflection, it might be very useful, like when learning advanced ninjutsu. Last place goes to midline horizontal ellipsis Uchiha Obito, the teacher announced, shaking his head. Damn it! Obito's instincts had failed him. His face showed a mix of frustration and unwillingness. It wasn't just the pain of his own failure, it was the sting of watching his rivals succeed. First, it had been Kakashi. Now, it was Hankawa. However, the two were different. Kakashi had zero interest in Rin, living by the philosophy that, women only get in the way of drawing my sword. Hankawa, on the other hand, had a great relationship with Kurenai and didn't shy away from Rin's attention either. What a despicable midline horizontal ellipsis no, enviable midline horizontal ellipsis no, a complete scumbag. Obito instinctively glanced at Rin. Obito. Rin noticed his gaze and comforted him gently, just try harder next time. She cares about me. Hearing her soft tone, Obito immediately forgot about Hankawa and nodded enthusiastically. The first semester has ended, and overall, the results are good, though some students need to adjust their attitudes. The teacher began his closing remarks. Rin found herself distracted. She was curious about how Hankawa managed to improve so dramatically. Maybe I should ask him next time. Alright, let's head to the field in order, the teacher clapped his hands and said. the students moved to the field to listen to Hiruzen Sarutobi's speech. It was a tradition for the Hokage to give a speech at both the opening and graduation ceremonies of the Ninja Academy. As both Hokage and the Academy's symbolic headmaster, Hiruzen took this opportunity to instill the will of fire in Konoha's future generations, hoping to nurture their growth. Now, let me share 6 key points. Midline horizontal ellipsis. Hiruzen stood on the podium, smiling as he began. What the heck is this? Half an hour later, Asuma was on the verge of storming the stage to drag his father down. The old man is completely wasting my time. Hankawa silently approved of the familial tension. Hiruzen was truly verbose, his speech flowing endlessly like a river. After another half hour, the speech finally ended. The teacher sighed in relief. Now, we'll begin the practical exam. Teacher. Asuma immediately raised his hand. I want to challenge Hankawa. No way. Obito jumped up. Hankawa is my opponent. No, he's mine, Kakashi said coldly. Rin raised her hand but then put it down again. She wanted to tell them all to stop fighting, but she knew her friends too well, they weren't easily persuaded. The only surprise was that Kakashi, usually aloof, had taken the initiative to challenge Hankawa. Hey! Obito couldn't hold back. Kakashi, why are you getting in my way? He couldn't recall any direct interaction between Kakashi and Hankawa. The only explanation was rivalry. You're not his match, Kakashi replied calmly, glancing at Obito. What did you say? Uchiha Obito exploded with anger. You're too impulsive. If you step in, you'll just embarrass yourself, Kakashi calmly analyzed. You. Obito completely lost his temper. Then I'll defeat you first. Don't ignore me. Sarutobi Asuma shouted loudly. Is Hankawa really that popular? Hiruzen Sarutobi, who had just stepped off the podium, glanced at this chaotic scene and unconsciously stroked his beard. It reminded him of his 3 disciples in their youth, so full of energy. Quiet. The teacher, Ichiro, noticed Hiruzen's presence and quickly intervened. If the commotion continued, he might lose his job. However, the current situation was genuinely tricky to handle. A Hokage's son, a White Fang's son, and an Uchiha, he couldn't afford to offend any of them. Hankawa, what's your take on this? Ichiro thought quickly and asked. I'm watching with my eyes, Hankawa thought but only coughed lightly and said, since my 3 classmates are so eager, let them all come at once. Huh? Ichiro was stunned. Those 3 weren't just ordinary students. Especially Kakashi, he was a genius among geniuses. Typical kids, Hiruzen Sarutobi chuckled. After all, only kids would want it all, adults understood their limits. You wicked little brat, Hankawa. I'll show you. Midline horizontal ellipsis. Asuma, enraged by Hankawa's arrogance, was about to make a move when Obito jumped in to claim the first spot. In that case, I'll start with Obito, Hankawa said indifferently. Ichiro hesitated for a moment before agreeing. Hankawa casually pulled out 2 kunai. Using kunai against a Uchiha? That's the dumbest move you could make. Obito smirked in disdain, his face all but saying, how dare you show off your petty tricks in front of an expert? Hankawa simply smiled. So cocky. Are you even good at fighting, little brat? Whoosh. 2 kunai flew past Obito's face. He instinctively touched his cheek and felt blood. I haven't even moved yet, how did I get taken down in an instant? He froze on the spot, completely stunned. Good control, Sakumo Hataki appeared in a flash, catching the two kunai mid-air and praising Hankoa. Superhuman strength? No, it wasn't that. Hiruzen, as an expert in ninjutsu, could immediately tell there were no special techniques involved, just raw strength. This reminded him of Tsunade, the girl who used to climb walls with ease. No wonder she had been spending time with Hankoa lately. So fast. Kakashi's inner alarms were blaring. His family's swordsmanship was renowned for its speed, yet he had barely reacted to those kunai. Winner, Hankoa, Ichiro announced, swallowing nervously. What kind of monster is this kid? The kunai throw alone was terrifying, and he was supposed to be a chunin. Wait. I'm not done yet. Obito snapped out of it, waving frantically at Ichiro. Obito. Rin Noara walked over, gently pulling him aside and taking out a bandage. Let me patch you up. Her actions not only tended to his wound but also gave him a way to save face. She had already realized that Obito wasn't remotely a match for Hankoa. OOT, do you guys know which novel in this site the MC was transmigrated into a sect elder but he didn't have any power at all, and must went through everything by pretending? I remember he has Phoenix Mount, but he was constantly scared of getting accidentally killed by it. The story is so good, but too bad I forget the title. Thanks, 37. Stay away from me. Hankoa felt very satisfied. The effect of the D-level trait, Ninja Tools Expert, was truly overwhelming in the first year. Although Obito Uchiha wasn't a complete underachiever, apart from his fire release, Great Fireball Jutsu, his basic skills were weak. Coupled with the lack of the Sharingan, he couldn't evade kunai thrown with 30% increased arm strength. At that moment, 3 lines of text appeared before Hankoa's eyes: E-level talent trait, Little Firestarter, trigger condition, defeat young Obito Uchiha. Effect, fire release proficiency increased by 10%. Double the rewards. Like Asuma Sarutobi, Obito Uchiha had triggered a new trait as well. The difference was that his was tied to fire release. Asuma, Hankoa called out, waving his hand. Come here. Now, he eagerly anticipated Asuma Sarutobi bringing more rewards to the table. Asuma Sarutobi had lost the arrogance he showed earlier. He wasn't a fool. Those 2 kunai throws earlier had made him feel a strong sense of danger. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel puzzled. Aren't you supposed to be an illusion ninja? Why are your kunai skills getting scarier? However, he couldn't back down at this point. With a serious expression, Asuma Sarutobi walked to stand across from Hankoa. After completing the seal of confrontation, Asuma's hands rapidly formed seals. Wind release, Gale Palm. Chakra transformed into wind. With a clap of his hands, a compressed blast of wind surged forward violently. He aimed for a swift attack. But in the next moment, Hankoa simply sidestepped to the left, effortlessly avoiding the gale as if he had anticipated it. What? Asuma Sarutobi's eyes widened in shock. Could it be that I've fallen into a genjutsu again? But when? Panicking, Asuma reflexively began forming seals. Genjutsu release. The chakra flow in his body wavered slightly, but nothing changed, he wasn't under an illusion. Breathing a sigh of relief, Asuma suddenly found Hankawa's face inches away from his. His heart skipped a beat. Oh no, stay away from me. Fox's mind disturbance jutsu. Caught off guard, Asuma Sarutobi froze on the spot, unable to react. Watching from the sidelines, Hiruzen Sarutobi facepalmed. A complete mess. Everything's a mess. The whole battle has devolved into chaos. Asuma had completely fallen into Yukawa's rhythm. Hiruzen even began to suspect that defeating Obito Uchiha was part of Hankawa's plan to bait Asuma into attacking hastily. Truly impossible to guard against. Hiruzen glanced at Hankawa, noticing his frown. Is he dissatisfied? Such pride, a trait of true geniuses. Hiruzen sighed inwardly. Asuma's talent, in the end, fell slightly short. But as the Hokage, he was pleased that Konoha had gained another genius, and one he had personally recruited. Damn it! Asuma Sarutobi could do nothing but fume with anger. It took him 3 whole seconds to break free from the fox's mind disturbance jutsu. If this had been a life-or-death battle, those 3 seconds would have been enough for him to die multiple times. I'll be back. Asuma shouted, leaving with a frustrated glare. Asuma! Hankawa suddenly called out. What is it now? Asuma asked impatiently. Your wind release is really strong, Yukawa said earnestly. Of course it is. Asuma froze for a moment before shouting loudly, next time, you'll see an even stronger wind release. I'll definitely win then. Success. Hankawa couldn't help but smile. Just now, after defeating Asuma Sarutobi, Hankawa didn't trigger a new trait, which left him frowning in dissatisfaction. He speculated that the lack of a trigger was due to insufficient challenge. After all, the last upgrade of the Whirlwind Chronicles trait had elevated it to a D-level trait. To upgrade further, Asuma Sarutobi might need to reach the rank of Genin or Chunin. This must be the will of fire. Hiruzen Sarutobi watched the scene unfold with a gratified expression. In his view, children didn't fake emotions, this must be a genuine display of passion. Konoha had no shortage of geniuses, another one wouldn't make much difference. But a genius imbued with the will of fire? That was entirely different. Perhaps he could persuade Tsunade to take Hankawa under the Hokage's lineage. It's my turn. Kakashi Hatake stepped into the arena with an expressionless face and unsheathed the short blade from his back. Hankawa's genjutsu and ninja tool skills surpassed his own. His only advantage was the Hatake family's kenjutsu. How does Kakashi's kenjutsu compare to yours? Hiruzen Sarutobi asked Shikumo Hatake curiously. Lord Hokage, Shikumo smiled faintly. He's just a child, at most, he's mastered 10% of my ability. Even with 10% of your strength, he already surpasses most genin, Hiruzen Sarutobi remarked, shaking his head. You flatter me, Lord Hokage. Shikumo replied humbly. You, always so. Hiruzen trailed off as his eyes caught sight of Hankawa unsheathing a katana. Interesting. Sakumo's eyes lit up. It seems Hankawa has been holding back. What is going on? Standing on the sidelines, Asuma Sarutobi looked incredulous. Does that mean he wasn't even trying against me? Seriously, were you just toying with me? Asuma clutched his neck, feeling a sudden shortness of breath. Hey, is he crazy? Using a sword against Kakashi. Obito Uchiha was stunned. The Uchiha clan's proficiency with kunai was well known, but only with the aid of the Sharingan. Without it, losing was understandable. However, the Hatake family's kenjutsu had no such limitations. In terms of renown, it was no less prestigious than the Uchiha clan. Obito, Rin Noara shook her head. Don't underestimate Hankawa, he's really strong. This isn't about strength, Obito argued. It's about... Go, Hankawa. Before he could finish, Kurenai Yuhi interrupted him with a cheer, sparking a wave of support from the crowd. Obito was dumbfounded. Since when did Hankawa get this popular? Curse you. You're even more infuriating than Kakashi. He instinctively glanced at Rin, noticing the light in her eyes, and was immediately gripped by a strong sense of crisis. You can use a sword? Kakashi asked, slightly surprised as he eyed the katana. I know a little, Hankawa replied with a smile. Against Kakashi, Hankawa wasn't entirely confident of victory. However, with a 30% strength boost from ninja tools mastery, and a 10% enhancement from Konoha-style swordsmanship, his chances were still quite high. After all, Kakashi was only 5 years old. Be careful, Kakashi warned, lowering his body into a combat stance. He wasted no words, propelling himself forward with explosive speed as his short blade gleamed like a streak of light, stabbing straight at Hankawa. Hankawa raised his right hand, positioning his katana horizontally to block. But Kakashi reacted swiftly, halting his blade mid-thrust and switching to a horizontal slash. Had it landed, Hankawa would have been cut in half, becoming 2.5 Hankawas. This was the hallmark of Tsukumo Hatake's kenjutsu, swift, precise, and ruthless, each strike designed to kill. Against high offense, low defense opponents, it was nearly unstoppable. But a longer weapon had its advantages. Hankawa rotated his arm, swinging the katana to strike first. Clang! Kakashi quickly withdrew his blade, parrying the katana. The moment the weapons clashed, his expression changed. A tremendous force surged through the blade, forcing Kakashi to take several steps back. OOT, I've found the novel. It's, my beautiful disciples, I'm really not the main character. 38. I am the Hokage. The crowd watching let out a collective gasp. Since their enrollment, Kakashi Hatake had been an undefeated presence. This was the first time they saw him falter. Obito Uchiha rubbed his eyes, hardly believing what he was seeing. Rin Noara clasped her fingers tightly, looking visibly tense. The battle continued. Taking advantage of Kakashi Hatake's unstable stance, Hankawa shot forward like an arrow leaving the bow. The samurai sword in his hand was raised high before it came slashing down. Danger! Kakashi Hatake dared not block it head-on. He rolled on the ground awkwardly, then quickly reversed his short sword to slash at Hankawa's thigh. A gust of wind swept past. Hankawa summoned his chakra and leapt into the air. In midair, she spun her right leg around, striking Kakashi Hatake square in the chest. Bang! His body was sent rolling backward. Hankawa landed without a moment's hesitation, his samurai sword swinging toward him. Gasps rang out again. Kakashi Hatake narrowly dodged the sword. The blade struck the ground, leaving a deep gash. Kakashi Hatake had no time to catch his breath before another flash of steel lit up before him. He quickly raised his short sword, blocking the samurai sword with precision. Ah! Kakashi Hatake gripped his sword with both hands, letting out a roar as he resisted the immense force. But he knew this wasn't sustainable. After only half a second, he suddenly let go. His short sword was flung away. Caught off guard, Hankoa stumbled forward. Kakashi Hatake leapt up, drawing a kunai from his waist and stabbing toward him, aiming to strike a critical blow. Hankoa! Kurenai Yuhi cried out instinctively. I won! Obito Uchiha cheered inwardly. Naturally, he hoped Kakashi Hatake would win. If Hankoa came in first, it would pose too much of a threat to him. He couldn't bear to watch Rin Noara being drawn to someone else. Asuma Sarutobi shuddered in astonishment. How are both of these guys so strong? Kakashi Hatake was understandable, his father was the legendary White Fang, Tsukumo Hatake. But Hankoa? A kidney strike. Hankoa felt a jolt in her heart. It was too late to adjust his body. He made a snap decision. His right hand twisted, and he hurled his samurai sword like a ninja tool. What? Kakashi Hatake had no choice but to turn and use his kunai to block the incoming sword. In that instant, his pupils shrank. Hankoa, using astonishing core strength, spun his body and caught the samurai sword midair. Under her control, the blade sparked against the kunai, followed by a crescent slash aimed at Kakashi Hatake's torso. Clang! Kakashi Hatake drew another kunai with his left hand, narrowly deflecting the strike. Hankoa pressed his sword downward, forcing him to hold off his blade with both kunai. Then, with his left hand, he threw a punch. Kakashi Hatake could only watch as the fist closed in, ultimately meeting his face mask with a forceful impact. The strength, far beyond his peers, left his cheek swollen as he fell backward. Hankoa took a step forward, pointing his sword at him and pinning him down. The training field fell silent. Is that Konoha-style swordsmanship? Hiruzen Sarutobi stroked his beard, visibly surprised. Hankoa's proficiency was beyond his expectations. More importantly, his genjutsu and skill with ninja tools were equally remarkable. To achieve this level in under a year was nothing short of astonishing. That's a fine blade. Tsukumo Hatake's eyes lit up. Kakashi's defeat wasn't undeserved. But this wasn't to say the Hatake swordsmanship was inferior. If both were equally skilled, Konoha-style swordsmanship might not even have a chance to parry. Well done. Shinku Yuhi, usually stoic, couldn't help but praise. He truly hadn't expected Hankoa to defeat Kakashi Hatake. After all, the genius reputation of this individual was renowned even among the Jonin. The only thing that troubled him was that Hankoa used Konoha-style swordsmanship instead of ninjutsu. Obito Uchiha took 2 steps back. How could this happen? The invincible Kakashi was defeated? Why was he so useless today? Yay! Kurenai Yuhi cheered excitedly. Rin Noara exhaled slowly as she gazed at Hankoa. It all felt surreal, and her perception of him was subtly beginning to shift. Ah! Hankoa-kun! The next second, many girls screamed in excitement. Strong and handsome, Hankoa had instantly won them over, skyrocketing his popularity to its peak. The winner, Hankoa. After a long pause, Ichiro finally announced. Oh my gosh! Comparisons are truly disheartening. Is this the world of geniuses? But on second thought, this was his opportunity. Teaching such a student would undoubtedly lead to promotions, raises, marrying a beautiful wife, and reaching the pinnacle of life. Are you okay? Hankawa approached and extended a hand. Kakashi Hatake silently grabbed his arm and stood up. He had considered the possibility of losing, but not like this, not to swordsmanship. Losing in the art of the Hatake sword style, which he prided himself on, left him with no room for excuses. Hankawa's thoughts stirred, and a new entry appeared in his system. E-rank talent entry, Thunderbolt Sword. Trigger condition, defeat a young Kakashi Hatake. Effect, enhances lightning release and swordsmanship talents by 10% based on their original levels. Hankawa was a bit surprised. Dual effects? As expected of Kakashi. What a spectacular duel, Hiruzen Sarutobi remarked. The future of Konoha lies in their hands. What comforted him most was Hankawa's attitude after the battle. Not arrogant or overbearing, he perfectly embodied the principle of putting the match second. The practical exams continued. The remaining matches paled in comparison, feeling like weaklings fighting amongst themselves. After watching for a while, Hiruzen Sarutobi left the training field. Lord Hokage. An ANBU ninja appeared outside the Hokage's office. Lord Danzo is waiting inside for you. Danzo? What does he want? Hiruzen Sarutobi pondered as he pushed open the door. Hearing footsteps, Danzo Shimura reluctantly stood up from the Hokage's chair. What do you want? Hiruzen Sarutobi walked to the Hokage's chair and sat down. He could feel the lingering warmth from where Danzo had been sitting and was left speechless. Oh, my old friend, I'm going to kick your butt for this. Give Hankawa to me. Danzo said directly. Shinku Yuhi cannot properly develop his potential. Under my guidance, he will surely become a sharp blade for Konoha. Danzo's insistence came after hearing about Hankawa defeating Kakashi Hatake. Kakashi was a genius Danzo coveted, but his father, Tsukumo Hatake, was untouchable, so he had to let that go. Hankawa was different. With no powerful background, all Danzo needed was to convince Hiruzen. I don't want a sharp blade, Hiruzen Sarutobi replied, shaking his head. I want Konoha's future. You're too naive. Danzo retorted firmly. Emotions only hinder a ninja. Enough talk. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked at him sharply. If there's nothing else, don't interrupt my work. You'll regret this, Hiruzen. Danzo's face darkened as he stormed out angrily. I am the Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi said calmly. Bang! Danzo slammed the door as he left. 39, Tsunade, he's mine. Are you a dog? Breaking doors every day. Hiruzen Sarutobi glanced at the wide-open doorway, feeling speechless. Lord Hokage, an ANBU ninja, appeared upon hearing the commotion. Wearing a frog mask, it was Haru. I'll go find him now, she said after a quick glance, immediately understanding the situation. Regret, anger, slam. She was far too familiar with this pattern. Wait a moment, Hiruzen Sarutobi suddenly stopped her. Call Tsunade here first. I have something to discuss with her. Understood. Haru disappeared instantly. Hiruzen lit his pipe and took a long puff, letting the displeasure brought by Danzo's visit dissipate into the smoke. Old man. You'd better have something important for me. Minutes later, a voice full of annoyance reached him before its owner appeared. Hiruzen looked up to see Tsunade storming in, clearly ready to confront him. He didn't need to guess the reason, it had to be because of a losing streak at the casino. Where's the door? Tsunade noticed the missing entrance, paused for a moment, and asked. Don't worry about it. Hiruzen waved it off indifferently. Who? Was it Danzo again? Tsunade quickly pieced it together, snorting coldly. You really need to keep him in check. He's not just any shinobi, he's a veteran who has contributed to Konoha. Hiruzen knocked his pipe against the ashtray casually. As long as it's for Konoha, let him be. For Konoha. More like for himself. Tsunade replied with disdain. Tsunade, Hiruzen cleared his throat. Give me some face, will you? Fine. What do you want? Tsunade narrowed her eyes. Don't waste my time if it's nothing important. I called you here because his talent in medical ninjutsu didn't match his proficiency in genjutsu. But he had a solid foundation, advancing step by step without skipping any fundamentals. Of course, what mattered most to Tsunade was that she liked him. Huh? Hankawa was caught completely off guard, his face showing pure surprise. Is this real? He had assumed he'd only have a chance to apprentice under her after acquiring a young release affinity, but it had happened much sooner than expected. What? You don't want to? Tsunade turned to him, her beautiful eyes gleaming with a hint of menace. I want to. Hankawa felt that even a second of hesitation might result in him being eaten alive. That's better, Tsunade said with a satisfied smile before reaching out her hand. Hankawa instinctively leaned back in a tactical retreat but couldn't avoid her patting his head. Let's go home, Tsunade said, her grin growing wider. Hankawa nodded with a resigned look. Great. Now that I'm her student, my status has automatically dropped. I'll probably have to endure her constant head pats from now on. Moments later, they arrived at Tsunade's home. Hankawa, having been there multiple times before, was no longer curious. He walked into the living room and asked, Sensei, what are we learning today? For the past month, he had been focusing on the basics, enough to hold his own against a koi fish in a battle. Come here. Tsunade headed straight for the kitchen, stopping at the doorway. Hankawa looked at her with a growing sense of foreboding. Today, I'm going to teach you how to cook, Tsunade said with a cheerful smile. Be a normal person, will you? I'm just a kid. Hankawa suddenly understood why Shizun became a housekeeper, secretary, and maid in the original story. The first lesson of being a ninja, self-reliance. Tsunade raised a pale finger, still smiling. What an excuse. You're just lazy. Still, cooking wasn't a problem for Hankawa. In his previous life, he cooked often. However, the cuisine in the ninja world was Japanese style, which had some differences. Let's start with something simple, tamago yaki, Tsunade suggested after some thought. Tamago yaki? I can do that, Hankawa said as he rolled up his sleeves and walked into the kitchen. Tamago yaki was essentially a rolled omelette, cooked eggs rolled up and topped with sauce. Oh. Tsunade said with interest. Go ahead, then. I'll watch. She didn't doubt him much, as Hankawa often showed more maturity than kids his age. All right. Hankawa stepped onto a small stool and began his performance. Do you cook often? Tsunade noticed how skillful he was. I'm an orphan, Hankawa replied casually. Tsunade froze for a moment, falling silent. She stepped closer and said, let me handle it. Put it down. Hankawa frowned. In the kitchen, I'm in charge. The last thing he liked was someone interfering while he was cooking. You brat, trying to rebel against me on your first day? Tsunade flicked his forehead but ultimately retreated to the doorway. She crossed her arms, watching Hankawa busy himself in the kitchen. For the first time in a while, she felt a sense of domestic comfort. Having a student isn't so bad. Now I have a legitimate excuse to slack off. It's done. Hankawa presented a plate of tamago yaki. The rolled omelette resembled sushi. Not bad, Tsunade said, picking up a piece and taking a bite. Just then, 3 lines of text appeared before Hankawa's eyes, making him freeze in surprise. An unexpected reward? E-rank talent, chef, trigger condition, first time cooking. Effect, increases food's flavor by 10%. It's useful, but not very much. Hankawa wondered if the next level was Master Chef or God Chef. Would the effect cause midline horizontal ellipsis explosive reactions? He glanced at Tsunade's curvaceous figure and couldn't help but gasp. Coach, no, system, I want to learn this. 1 plate of tamago yaki isn't enough. Tsunade took off her jacket and tossed it to him. Go wait outside. I'll make another dish. Hankawa swiftly caught the warm jacket and turned to watch Tsunade cook, feeling that something seemed off about the scene. Will it taste okay? Then he remembered a flashback from the original story, where Tsunade cooked for Nawaki. Nawaki's reaction after eating it was as if he'd been poisoned. No, please, no. Hankawa suddenly felt despair creeping in. Wait. A glimmer of hope appeared in his mind. He recalled that Tsunade's roasted chicken had turned out pretty decent. But roasting and stir-frying were 2 entirely different things. Holding the tamago yaki, Hankawa walked into the living room, sat at the dining table, and anxiously awaited his fate. Here's some tempura. Try it. Soon, Tsunade appeared with a dish. Fried food. Hankawa's spirits lifted as he picked up a piece of fried shrimp, chewed a few times, and his eyes lit up. This is really good, he said. It wasn't Michelin star quality, but the relief of surviving a potential culinary disaster made it taste even better. Tsunade nodded slightly. She was skilled at frying and roasting, but stir-frying? That was another story entirely.